Okay, good afternoon. This is a City Planning Commission special meeting held in Spector Hall at 22 Reade Street in Lower Manhattan. Today is Monday, July 10th, 2017. I will now call the roll. Chair Lago.
Here.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Besser. Here. Commissioner Cantor. Here. Commissioner Cirillo. Here. Commissioner De La Uz. Commissioner Dweck. Here. Commissioner Eady. Here. Commissioner Efron.
Here.
Commissioner Knight. Here. Commissioner Levin. Here. Commissioner Marin. Commissioner Ortiz. A quorum is present. Let's turn to page 1 in the calendar. Borough of Queens, calendar numbers 1 through 8. Calendar numbers 1 and 3 have been withdrawn. Community District 14, calendar number 2, C170243A, ZMQ. Calendar number 4, N170244A, ZRQ. Calendar number 5, N170245, HGQ. Calendar number 6, C170246, HUQ. Calendar number 7, C170247, HDQ. Calendar number 8, C170248, PPQ. And the matter of applications for zoning map and zoning text amendments or urban renewal plan designation, disposition of an urban renewal site, acquisition disposition of city-owned property concerning the downtown Far Rockaway development plan. For favorable reports as modified on calendar numbers 2 and 4, and for favorable reports on calendar numbers 5 through 8, Chair Lago.
I'd like to preface my vote with a few remarks. It's exciting to be here on this second of our comprehensive rezonings. And there are people that we have to thank, and it starts with Councilmember Donovan Richards because he spearheaded the community-based planning effort. But it goes further. There's the Downtown Far Rockaway Working Group who delivered a set of sound recommendations to the administration, and others, Community Board 14, our Queensborough President, Melinda Katz, and especially the residents who participated in the planning effort and who spoke at our public hearing and who submitted written testimony. I'd also like to recognize the multi-agency effort, which was led by the Economic Development Corporation, but it was far broader than that. It also included the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development, Parks and Recreation, Small Business, Transportation, and of course, City Planning. And speaking of city planning, I want to call out two particular folks, our Queens Borough Director, John Young, and Brendan Pillar of the Queens office. Of course, as in any major rezoning, they were bolstered by experts from so many different divisions, including urban design, zoning, environmental and technical review, and legal. I'm going to end with a bad pun, which is that Far Rockaway was established first as a summer resort, and the fortunes of this town have gone up and down like a roller coaster. And I'm confident that with today's actions, Far Rockaway will once again be on the rise. And so I'm proud to vote yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Delighted to vote yes. I remember it well.
Commissioner Cirillo.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Eady.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
I do have to say on one of these applications, the disposition of the 2 city-owned properties, I think we heard compelling testimony from many folks in the community about the importance of keeping the sanitation site in city ownership until an appropriate use for that site was determined. We have a letter from EDC expressing their commitment to consult with the community and not do anything on our disposition until an appropriate use is determined, whether it be open space or housing. Those seem to be the 2 ideas on the table. I would prefer that we weren't voting on that disposition now, but that's a small piece of a much larger package, and so I'm pleased to vote yes on everything.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Favorable reports as modified have been adopted on calendar numbers 2 and 4, and the favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 5 through 8. We will now start the review session of July 10th, 2017. A quorum is present. And our first item is a presentation by Laura Riegelheim, Acting Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, and Mitch Gibson, Deputy Director for the Administration for Children's Services, who will present an update of the Daycare Center lease renewal process.
Good afternoon, Chair Lago, Vice Chair Knuckles, and all the commissioners. My name is Laura Ringelheim. I am the Acting Deputy Commissioner at the Real Estate Services line of service of DCAS. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you today. I'm going to give you an overview of what DCAS does for cities, for agencies citywide in terms of the leasing process, and explain where that varies with respect to how we do ACS leases in particular. So first I'm going to talk about we kind of bucket our leasing process into 3 different buckets: conceptual, development, and approval, and then discuss a little bit about post-lease execution and DCAS's role there. So this chart presents very high level, and I'll go through each one and what each stage of our process means, but we've included this chart just to give you an idea of where ACS's responsibilities lie and where DCAS's responsibilities lie for its work citywide with respect to leasing. So what we've called the conceptual phase, and this is, with respect to ACS, I know we're talking about a lot of renewals, and we've focused this presentation on the renewal process, but even for agencies that need new space or ACS that needs new space, we call it a conceptual phase where the agencies will prepare what's called the space request form. And this is based either on like a new head count, or they have a new need, or if their lease is expiring. So DCAS reaches out to all agencies. We keep track of when you have expiring leases, and about 30 months before that lease expires, we reach out to the agency and say, hey, what are your plans? Do you want to renew? Do you need new space? With a lot of the daycares, I know what's on the table now are a lot of renewals. We will talk about the expiration dates. We'll look at ULURP to see if they need a new ULURP and talk about what's required for that process. The agency will respond to us, and we'll start engaging in discussions with them about, if they think that they want to renew and stay in their space, and what that means. Does the space need work? Does it meet their needs as far as location? This is all done in the planning stages. For some agencies, this might mean we really don't like our space. It doesn't work for a variety of reasons, and we're going to go look for new space, in which case we'll assign what our tenant rep is, basically our contracted broker, and we'll begin a search for new space. Before any of that happens, we need OMB approval. So OMB will also look at the space request and yes or no, based on the need. If it's an expiring lease, of course, there's a need either to renew or get new space. And that triggers our either design and project management team looking into how much space is required, or in this case, it's going to be for ACS daycare centers, ACS is going to look at the space required. Talk about that a little more. Next slide. So the development phase, now we have OMB approval to go and look for new space or stay in the existing space. And what differs mostly here is the scope of work. So if we're going to renew a lease or get a new lease in that same location, DCAS will do the scope of work for pretty much all agencies. So all the design and all the project management and what's going to be in that scope of work for the new lease. The big difference here is that ACS for daycare centers, they do that themselves. They have that team in-house. So they develop the scope of work. ACS office leases, that's different. DCAS's main focus is interior office space with some exceptions. And when ACS is doing the scope of work, DCAS will be simultaneously negotiating with the landlord, but also if doing soft market search to obtain comparables, so we know what we should be paying for that space. ULURP applications will also be reviewed during this time to see if we need to do ULURP status to see if we need to do a new ULURP. So ACS is going to talk about the scope of work. I had included a few slides from previous presentations about what would be included in that scope. Again, for most leases that DCAS is negotiating, the scope is not going to change so much. I've highlighted in another slide some exceptions of what might be required for ACS in particular, and I'll let ACS talk about this slide after my presentation to talk to you about what they're looking for in the scope. But again, it's pretty standard as far as any lease that the city is going to enter into. And here, again, are other issues for scope that I'm sure you've heard before, but life safety, ADA compliance, what repairs, are they MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing required, roofing, structural, all of these are things that are decided, all of the regulatory requirements. And again, ACS is going to sign off on that scope, and DCAS will work to negotiate it into the lease document in terms of cost and who's going to, working with ACS in terms of who's going to pick up the cost for what is required. Last phase is approval phase. So once ACS has signed off on that scope of work and we have secured ULURP approval if necessary, DCAS will finish negotiating with the landlord. DCAS will also send the lease to its attorneys to negotiate any of the legal terms with landlord's counsel, and then we'll send it to the law department for final review and approval as to form. DCAS will also coordinate any of the required hearings, so the charter required 824 hearing, that is a DCAS function. And then finally, lease execution, DCAS will sign off on the lease. These are items that we've listed out here because they're part of what would be required for ongoing maintenance and repair and services that the landlord would provide. What we've highlighted in red are just things that are unique to ACS. So basically, DCAS will negotiate these items, ACS in this, for daycare centers, and plate tiles for the roof and kitchen equipment, dumbwaiters are some examples of what might be additionally required in the scope and in ongoing obligations for the landlord under the daycare leases. So post-lease execution, generally agencies maintain most of the roles for ensuring that the lease obligations are adhered to. A few exceptions, DCAS does have an audit unit, so if we'll randomly select a number of leases to audit so that if we're to make sure we're not overpaying real estate taxes, not overpaying operating expenses, that's a DCAS function. Agencies also do it themselves, but we're the ones really with the audit unit. We do it either sometimes on request or randomly. And DCAS can provide lease guidance as far as interpretation. After all, we've negotiated a lot of the business terms and some of the legal terms, so we'll provide guidance there. And also dispute resolution. So if you look at what ACS has to do post-lease execution, so they're responsible for design and project management, meaning all of the construction and build out after the lease is executed, as well as signing off on substantial completion. The work is complete as to what's required by the lease. And then post substantial completion, the agency is responsible for making sure that the property is upheld according to the lease requirements. So that includes repairs and maintenance, dispute resolution, and the remedies that are provided for in the lease. So I think from my understanding of what's transpired historically is that some of these were not, we didn't always enforce lease compliance. And I know ACS is going to talk a little bit about how they have increased enforcement. But also on the DCAS side, we're making sure that we have very tight requirements and that the agencies can reach out to us for assistance if they need to enforce something. So for instance, the emergency repair needs to be made. There might be a 24-hour provision for that landlord to fix it upon the 24-hour notice. If they don't do it, the remedy might be that you withhold rent, or you use self-help, make the repair yourself, and then you present the landlord with a receipt, but that repair would get done at no cost to the city. Likewise, if it's a 5-day notice repair, same remedy, or that we can withhold rent. So in other words, there is a mechanism for the city not to pay until those repairs are made. There's additional rights where we can terminate a lease. Depending, these are all just examples, but things that we're making sure are built into that lease. That's the end of my presentation. I can take some questions now, or we can have Mitch Gibson from ACS go and answer later.
Yes, Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple of questions. Does DCAS still look to the landlord primarily to do the scope of work through the landlord's contractors, or does the city in certain instances hire its own contractors contractually to do the work?
So for I'm going to have to let ACS. I know for generally, the landlords hire their contractor, and we oversee that bidding process.
You oversee, do you approve contractors or?
DCAS does for non-ACS daycare leases, and I'd have to let ACS talk about approval for ACS leases. I think that, yes, we can. So in general, DCAS leases, yes.
Okay, so when it comes to getting the C of O from buildings, who is responsible for that? Is it the landlord or is it the agency?
The landlord's responsible.
Okay.
Just so I can add, our process is designed to mimic their process. So we step in on daycare sites by our agreement, but we do not apply different protocol.
I just have one more. And hopefully this never occurs, but where you have an instance where you have to vacate a site, be it for maybe you don't want to do business with the landlord, or God forbid there's some other emergency. What do you do in those cases? How do you accommodate the space needs for the children and the clientele?
I don't know that we've had to, but
I think we actually did on one occasion, and we try obviously to, first thing is to try and put the kids in other daycare sites nearby, and that's our primary goal, and that we're generally pretty successful at that, but in other instances, families have to handle their kids during that time if there's no options that are available in the community. So it's very rare. I can think of one since I've been at ACS that we had to actually vacate the premises to do some work.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Efron.
I think this is a DCAS question, not an ACS question, but it refers to at least an ACA building type. So many of the daycare center and senior centers we've seen have been either single-purpose or dual-purpose buildings, and now we're coming up to 40-plus years of lease occupation. At what point in the decision-making path does DCAS make a decision to acquire a building as opposed to extend a lease?
So that's a decision that we make alongside the agency. DCAS wouldn't make it alone. We'd work in conjunction, but it could be at any time. Certainly, time would be 30 months prior to lease expiration so that we weren't in holdover, but it really could be made at any time. Might also depend on whether there's a provision in the lease that allows acquisition after lease expiration. Does that answer?
It does. It's really an economic question. It's outside of our land use purview, but since we are the only body that seems to be holding public hearings about these leases, it's something that Commissioner Knuckles has brought up on several occasions with other DCAS leases. It just seems as if there isn't at least a designated time where there's some cost-benefit analysis about acquisition, purchase versus lease.
I think that's happening now. It doesn't set a specific time, but it is definitely something that's gotten the attention of folks, and we actually have been doing that analysis, lease versus purchase. So I think this, even before the mayor's cost savings initiative for lease spaces came along, this is just for office space, part of the new analysis, and we are expanding the DCAS team to assist with the cost of lease versus buy. So ACS can probably talk about it more for each of their sites, but that is something that we're trying to implement across the board.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Just adding, I'm sorry. We are actually in the process of buying our second daycare site, and it's 10 days from now is going to be the closing. So then that was done through an analysis that was managed by city operations. So it is that assessment is going on. It was prompted by the landlord indicating that they wanted to sell, and so then we offered to buy.
So is that a future ULURP? Is that a coming attraction for us?
The ULURPs on these properties permitted purchase.
Okay, okay. So I'd just like to expand on Commissioner Efron's question and into sort of an understanding of DCAS's oversight of the city's real estate portfolio in general. And ACS rolls in and says, we'd like to renew this daycare center. Do you have an understanding of development projects that might be going on in the pipeline, other initiatives by other agencies where there might be opportunities or synergies that you could occur, that ACS might not know about because they're just managing that particular location? But, you know, across the city, everything's moving around with great rapidity, and I wonder what sort of critical analysis ACS gives during the conditional phase to whether there are other ways besides lease renewal of satisfying ACS's desire to provide services in that neighborhood.
So I have 3 points on that. So one is that I think in the past couple of years, DCAS has been engaging other agencies, for instance, HPD or DYCD, to co-locate or see where those needs are best met. Second, as part of the cost savings analysis that the first deputy mayor ordered, DCAS is going to engage a new team that I just talked about. One will be for the cost-benefit analysis of purchase versus lease. But this team will also, and we actually have been working with city planning on how to structure this team, but they will have people dedicated to doing those kind of analyses earlier. So, for instance, if there's a person now that will be situated at DCAS that will be responsible for more than one agency's portfolio, to do an analysis, to talk much earlier on than we do now, because most of the time we've been just putting out fires when leases need to be renewed. But the goal of this new team is to do exactly that and work with other agencies and plan in advance so we can use city planning's data to see where the locations might be needed, who they might be co-located with. So we're in the process of hiring those folks now, but that's the long-term goal.
Great. That's a direct response to conversations we've had around this podium for any number of years now as the latest wave of renewal applications came our way. We've had some pretty pointed conversations about the desirability of doing that, and I'm very glad that it's happening.
We are, too.
Yes, Commissioner Efron.
I just want to make one point, and it comes up with the daycare center leases, but with lease renewals, there's an old code, new code building department difference. And with the old code, as I understand it, and I hope I'm getting these facts right, this is not my area of expertise, sprinklers aren't required except perhaps in a kitchen area for daycare centers. But if these daycare centers were opening in a new facility that was recently constructed, they would have sprinklers. Has there been any thought about really looking at that? Because it's something that just strikes me as one of those areas where I always feel slightly derelict.
Now I do too, but I'm hoping someone can answer.
So I'm sorry, your question is whether we're bringing everything up to code?
No, I think it does meet code. It's
Okay.
a question about whether child care centers are required to have sprinklers in an old code building. And my understanding, having asked this question before, is that they aren't, except maybe in
No, they're
specific
not.
circumstances around a kitchen.
Yeah, they're not, but if they're going to have infants, then they are. So it depends on the age of the children in it. But if it's above an infant, it's not required.
Well, again, this is outside of our land use, except that I would say that given the number of daycare centers we have seen and that all of them were renewals in older buildings, it seems like a teeny cost in some possible best practice in life safety, even if it's not code.
Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you so much. I guess there's some focus on coordination issues. So let me ask you this. At what point in the process is there a review or coordination of different city agency needs at the same time, and whether or not consolidation of space, or while one agency may be looking to relocate because they have greater needs, but that the space and the landlord and the relationship is very positive, but that two different agencies can come into a space. Where does that, is that in the conceptual phase once you get the sort of space forms from different agencies? Is it cool?
So that's not here at all yet.
Okay.
And it's a great point. I think when we, aside from the issues with ACS daycare centers, we've realized that this is an issue citywide because no one's really talking. No one's coordinating that and putting it together. So the new plan, which we have literally just posted, I mean, we've been kind of working on this since February to get the new roles ironed out, posted the job descriptions, but that this would happen 42 months before lease expiration. So before we even get here, we would be looking at what leases we have, where space isn't being well utilized or underutilized, where it would make sense for two agencies to work together. It hasn't happened before because agencies just don't work together unless it benefits them. This is going to be looking at it from the city side of how best to maybe co-locate these. So we don't have it here, but it would be before we even get to the conceptual phase, because by the time you're at the conceptual phase, there's a need, and we have to start working on filling that need. This is going to be in advance of that.
Okay, and I don't recall this exactly how this works, but in light of the part of the process where you say, looking at space that may not be utilized fully anymore, and I do remember shrinking the size of space as an agency head, but I don't remember if since we were still in the building, the space was available, I don't remember if that was reported to anyone at the time. Is there a process in place where there's a survey done at some point, different times during the lease period? Because it could certainly be, it could be early on in a lease, it could be late in a lease, certainly before the 30 or 40 some odd months before that. You really know, how do you get the information from the agencies that an agency that once was using, this much space is now using this much space? To know, to plan for that as you're moving ahead.
Sure. So now there's a self-reporting by the agencies, the gazetteer exercise in conjunction with city planning that's posted on utilization and head counts and how much space the agencies had. We don't think that might be the most effective way to do it. So part of the new portfolio planning team would actually have folks that go out and take a look and see what the head count really is and what the utilization is and if the space is being well used. So that's another part. So part of it is just planners to look at what are the agency's needs, and part is to really look at what the agency is using.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I know you're in the process of renegotiating those leases that, those 20-year leases that expired in 12 and 13. What percentage of the ACS leasehold has been renegotiated? What's left percentage-wise?
70? About 70, am I hearing right? 70% still have to be negotiated?
Oh, you got a long way to go.
A long way to go.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Wow. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mitch Gibson, Deputy Commissioner for Administration at ACS. And I think many of you were here when I spoke to the commissioners last time. It's a couple years ago. Chair Lago wasn't here then, but Carl Weisbrot was. And so I'm here to kind of, I guess, update you a little bit on what we've been doing. I don't know how much you recall that conversation, but at that time, we were working very hard at getting our arms around the challenge of looking at maintenance across the board, introducing new ways to do that, and to get our scopes set up so that they could get into to ULURP and coordinating that with DCAS. So some of these slides you may recall, but it's a couple years now, but this slide talks about just in general our portfolio. We have 385 locations, and city leased are 76, and those are the ones that we discuss here that are involved in lease renewal. We have city-owned, and we have NYCHA, and we have the bulk of them are handled directly between the provider and landlords. So there's a lot of oversight in daycare. From federal to state to city, and even within the city. This slide is intended to show you the gradation going forward from the ground on how we manage the sites. So the primary oversight entity, of course, is the provider, and we rely heavily on the provider to keep track of what's going on in the space, to let us know if there's a problem, and to call it in when they see something. After that, we have our own early care and education unit, which goes out on a regular basis to assess, and they have a group of people that does that. Beyond that, we have a new group that we brought on board, a set of consultants who have a checklist that they go out with, and they look at every site, and they look at all matter of issues related to maintenance with that checklist. On top of that, there's the DOHMH, which goes out every year or two to update the licenses. So they assess the properties when they do that as well. That's sort of the key player in all of this. You have to get a license from DOH to function. On top of that, we have FDNY, who does their routine assessments, and there's a subset of sites that are Head Start sites, and the federal government comes out and does audits. I think I might have talked a little bit about that last time. They did an audit back in 2015, and we actually used that audit as the basis for going forward. So the audit tool that the federal government gave us, and to help us be ready for them, became something that we really appreciated and decided to use throughout the portfolio. So we hired these consultants to come in and to use that tool to do audits across the entire portfolio. So these are the audits that we've done since I was last here. We did 190 in 2015, 190 in 2016, 197 so far in 2017. So we've done 577 audits since I was here, and these audits are very detailed. They have a very long checklist. The idea is to catch anything and everything that should be caught that affects health and safety for a daycare center. We used this audit when the federal government came out to do their audit of us, and we passed. They are very, very intense in how they go about it, and so we learned a lot about that process at that time. Give you a sense of how our work order process has evolved in terms of reacting to the utilization of this audit. I should mention that all the parties that I mentioned, that I showed earlier here, all have been trained. That is, the provider agencies, our own early care and education staff, as well as the consultants, have all been trained to use the audit. So they go out and they assess now properties using the tool that we developed for audits. So they, just normal things: is the egress light open? Is the exit site working? Can you get out? Is the stairway clear? Is the hallway clear? Basics like that. So these are the elements that go into the assessments. So what's happened with regard to our work order? So this is just a sense of how we've been evolving. So the audit, of course, now generates more attention, and it generates more work orders. So we had 300 in 2015, close to 500 in 2016, to 329 in 2017 is to date. So that's halfway through the year. So we're kind of increasing the amount of work orders that are being generated as a result of closer attention being made to health and safety by our provider, by our health and safety consultants, as well as our ECE staff. Where do these work orders go? They go into our help desk, which receives all of them. And then we have in-house trades and contractors who are responsible for going out and making these repairs. As was stated earlier, it depends on the type of work that we're doing as to whether we use an in-house trade or a contractor, or we require the landlord to do the work. So in many cases, it's a lease matter if it's something that isn't urgent but should be done by them. We have a lease enforcement unit. It's headed by the gentleman here, Khadr Sheikh, who's been doing it for many years. We would want to point out that we do not hesitate to bring landlords to task if there's something that they are required to do. That we have no problem with that. If we don't feel like they're going to do it quickly enough, we will go in ourselves and do it. Our first priority always is the safety of the children in care, and so our job is to get it done as quickly as possible. If it's something that can be done by the landlord, then we require them to do that within a very quick period of time, 24 hours to get started, and whatever amount of time shortly thereafter, and we monitor those things very carefully. With regard to the way in which we look at the work that needs to be done. Typically, during the course of a lease, we're looking at repairing things. Right? Something is broken, we go in and repair it. That's our standard approach. If it can't be repaired, we replace. If it can be repaired, we would rather repair it than replace it. And so this is sort of the classic expense type of work. We've done over $20 million over the last 3 years. When we get to replace, when we get to the lease renewal, we're looking to replace everything. So when we develop a scope of work, we send our crew out to think about every possible thing that can be replaced. This is trying to basically turn something that is 20 years used to something that is brand new. So this is a capital eligible effort. You know, it runs from $1 million to $2 million depending on the size of the property. And we've set it up now that this is generally going to be done by the landlords. And we have taken on the duty of developing those scopes of work. We've worked with our partners in DDC to do that, and we've been very successful in getting those done. We have, since we last talked, hired staff to help us do maintenance. We've hired an additional 19 people over the last 2 years. They're the ones who are, doing oversight. They're doing electrical. They're doing carpentry, regular routine staff. We've bolstered our team to do that along with our contract group. We're in the process of upgrading our software. I had hoped that when if I came back at this point, we would have it. Software is very hard to buy, but we are in the middle of it. We've identified the software. In fact, it's the same software that DCAS is using. And so we're following their lead in procuring that, and we hope to have that sort of up and running in the next 6 to 8 months. As most of you, I think, know, I'm sure the chair knows, that we've got a number of sites that are up for ULUP initiation. There's 29 that are pending. We have a few out years, and we are in the process of doing the scopes of work for those. But right now, we've done the scopes for the 29 that are waiting for certification. Questions that you might have. So I think most of these have been answered. We developed the scopes of work. We partnered with DDC. It hasn't been our sort of on our sweet spot. We needed some help with an expert in that regard. So we partnered with DDC, who does this for a living, and we've been developing them now very, very aggressively. Who determines what to fix? If a call comes in, we will go out and assess it and make a judgment as to whether, in fact, we should do it or the landlord should do it. If it's urgent, we do it right away. If it can be done by the landlord quickly, then we enforce that. We ask them to do that. All of the oversight and inspection is us. Like I said, we've added 19 people to that, and we've also added consultants. So we have a lot of people that are very much involved in overseeing the work that gets done, it gets initiated, and it gets finished. This is a general statement about ADA compliance. Of course, whenever we can, we upgrade to include work on the facility to upgrade to ADA. I don't have a thank you slide. Thank you. Questions?
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi, thank you for that, over here.
Ah.
I'm all the way at the end.
Yeah, it comes from...
Could you clarify, you mentioned the audits and that you have a checklist. How frequently does that occur? And, is that, I guess that's a mix of your consultants and your ACS staff?
It's been primarily our consultants. They've been very busy, but we do some ourselves as well. Yeah.
Okay, so how frequently, like, what's a cycle for that?
Well,
any given site gets audited?
At least so far, and again, this is new, but about once every other year at the moment. We're trying to get to once every year, but to date, we've been doing them now every other year.
Okay, so then the follow-up question is your lease enforcement. How does that overlap with the audits? Are those two separate processes? Because I imagine there's an opportunity when you're doing an audit to incorporate some sort of review that takes into account lease enforcement. So you're not, sort of it's double work. to do that? Or could you just explain sort of the differences between the audit and the lease enforcement?
Well, the lease enforcement is a question of who does the work. The audit is to identify the work.
So the audit, when the audit is done, they go in understanding what the lease says and what needs to be, you know, what sort of baseline requirements need to be met under the lease?
Well, they do understand what is in the lease. That's part of our educating them when they started. We don't ask them to make the judgment as to whether the landlord should do it. We do that in-house. So, you know, Caduce would do that. They would bring the findings back and report them, and then we would follow up if there's a lease enforcement issue.
Okay, so there's a connection
There's a
between
connection.
the audit and the lease enforcement?
Yes, if they find a matter that we think the landlord should handle, then we go after the landlord at that time.
Are most leases generally, you know, have similarities across the kinds of things that you enforce so that there's a general understanding when they come back with the audit results?
Yes, I mean, I think it's pretty much a standard document, so it's pretty much the same in every instance.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cantor?
Thank you. You mentioned earlier, I think, that you had done about $20 million worth of work in the past several years.
Yes.
My question is, are these jobs bid? Are they low bid? Are they contracted out to a panel that you have as an approved panel? How does it work?
Well, the answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. It depends on how much work is required. So we'll have contractors available. All of our contractors are procured through the city's procurement rules. So in many instances that would be bid out, or in some instances it would be sort of a micro procurement, and we would have it done through those rules. So it depends on the situation.
On the issues, on the circumstances in which you decided that you guys will do it yourselves, excuse me. What's the normal, if there is such a word, what's the normal time frame from need to knocking the first nail in the wall?
Well, you know, in our world, there's a degree of urgency in everything we do. So, you know, when we find something that needs to be done, it's on as fast as possible approach. It can be immediate. It can be, if, you know, there are times when we send somebody out that day. If we get a call that sounds like it's an urgent matter, we will have somebody dispatched to look at it immediately. So it really depends on the situation, but everything we do has a high degree of urgency behind it. We just can't tolerate any kind of situation that is a health and safety matter.
Are these contractors brought out on a T&M basis or a lump sum basis?
Well, they will, depends on on the work as to whether we agree that they could do it on a TM. Generally, it's not time and materials. Generally, they'll give us a proposal to do the work. But if it's an urgent matter, gas leak, you know, go fix it, right? And so it'll come back as time and materials.
And you have pricing from the various vendors as for various efforts they have to make in terms of man hours applied? How does that work? Because basically that would be T&M, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. If it's something like they've got to go and do some kind of immediate repair, they'll bill us on that.
I understand that.
But we will always, you know, be somebody that we've already have contracted with to do, say, plumbing. So we've already got the pricing. They just have to bill us accordingly. We wouldn't have time to do a bidding process for something like that.
But the discretion as to whether a job is given out or not given out lies with your organization,
Yes.
your group.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, we would send our own staff out. If we could do it ourselves, we'd rather do it ourselves, and we don't have to worry about billing. It's just, you know, it's much easier if we can do it with our own carpenter or our own plumber, which is why we brought on a whole host of them. We'd rather do it ourselves if we can.
Are we doing it, lost my train of thought, sorry. Yes, are these union jobs or non-union?
It's all union.
Sorry?
Union.
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner DeWitt?
Thank you. So, just to clarify, on the scope of work, you mentioned that the average is 1.5 million. That's on a renewal, on every renewal?
On a lease renewal.
On a lease renewal. And,
Yeah.
and who bears those costs? Is that the city, or is that the landlord, or is that a combination?
Mostly the city. Sometimes it can be the landlord. It depends on how it's negotiated, but these days, becoming mostly the city.
And what would your preference be? The city do the work or the landlord do the work? If you had a preference.
It's a hard question to answer. Given the amount of time it takes for the city to do the procurement, we'd rather, in general, that the landlord do it and we oversee it, as opposed to us doing it, because it just takes a lot longer for us to do it. And we'd rather not take it any longer than we need to.
Thank you.
Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, that actually feeds into a kind of historical question I had. I think the last time we talked about this was maybe a couple of years ago. And at that
April
time,
of 2015, I believe, is that
yeah.
right? I think we all, those of us on this side
But
remember.
who's counting?
Yeah, well, and some of us remember our
Oh,
little
okay,
pieces of
somebody's got
paper,
notes,
but-
all right.
And, you know, one of the commission's big questions as that wave of applications, you know, I think led to that conversation 2 years ago, was about the length of the lease term. And we were told that at that time, the city was pursuing relatively short renewal terms, 5 to 10 years, because they were doing an overall needs assessment for these daycare centers and, you know, didn't want to get too far out there with lease terms if it turned out that the needs assessment suggested they might go in a different direction. So my question for you is, where are you on the needs assessment, and how is it informing this lease renewal process?
Well, we need all the sites. That's the, you know, that's the bottom line. And it really is handled through the procurement, through the renewal of the contracts with the daycare sites. When we go out to contract with them, we get proposals back, and that's generally where the demand is generated. But we've yet to see any site become not needed.
But
Generally,
I
there's more
thought
demand.
when we talked about this before, you were taking a bigger look at demographics, how neighborhoods were changing, who's moving where, how the need might be shifting around, whether a certain, we have one daycare center that we're looking at today that has, at least in the 90s, had a capacity of a lot more children than the current information suggests it serves. How are you, what oversight is there of the match between neighborhood need, capacity in the existing facilities, and where new needs may be popping up that ACS has to feed?
I'm not the best person to answer that. I mean, our early care and education people could do a better job of that. I would,
Okay.
maybe we can get back to you on that, because I don't want to
Because the
misstate.
thing is, that's really our responsibility here as planners.
Yeah.
Is to be sure that we're approving arrangements for space in the locations where everything we know as ACS as a service provider and we as planners know that the need exists.
Yeah, well, I can assure you, when we come to you, we've determined that the need exists. The question
Okay,
is,
except we were told there was a needs assessment going on, so I guess I'd like to find out what happened to that needs assessment. If it concluded that everything was needed, I'm not second guessing the conclusion, but we were told then that there was some process going on.
yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that, but I can tell you that in our, you want to say something? So, the short answer is that, you know, with regard to the properties that we're bringing to you, we've absolutely determined that they're needed. On a broader scale, I'd have to get back to you on how they're going about incorporating that assessment. I've yet to hear that they found that they don't. need
That wouldn't surprise me at
Yeah.
all, but,
There's a lot of need out in
but
the
there's
daycare
probably a little more discipline behind it than
There
you're
is.
in my hunch.
Yeah, I wasn't overseeing it, so I can't speak to it in detail.
Okay,
Commissioner Dweck.
Going back to needs assessment, so being the city has the ability to finance capital projects at a relatively low cost, has there been an assessment done as to whether it pays to purchase our own properties and obviously we've been doing this for 40 years and we don't seem to be going out of the business of daycare. So has there been an assessment done, the feasibility of what is in the best long-term interest of the city, whether it's to own or rent or in the cost involved?
That process is beginning to happen. OMB is looking very closely at that, considering the rental cost today. Of course, you know, people tend to price their properties accordingly to a cash flow, so they tend to reflect each other. But there have been instances in which we have determined that it's better to buy. And so there's been, like I said, we're getting ready to close in another 10 days or so on a purchase. So yes, that assessment's going on, but it's something that's really handled by OMB. So I'm not, we're not directly involved in their thinking, but I know they're looking at it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi, and just quickly, along the lines of what is in fact our purview, the sort of urban context, we've been talking a lot about the interior of the spaces and the scope of work, but in many cases, these buildings aren't the best neighbors, whether they're sort of hidden entrances. I mean, even the building we're looking at now looks a little fortress-like. There are no windows, or they're covered up, and it looks like a jail. And so that's uncomfortable, I guess, for us to look at that, and for me, certainly, to approve something that, could very well be more of a contribution to the neighborhood in terms of urban design. Are you guys looking at that? Do you consider any of that in terms of your audit or your review of sites?
We're looking at health and safety primarily, so I think there is an opportunity to broaden the scope of work when we get to lease renewal, to look at the aesthetics. So it's not something that is primary to us, but it's not something that we're, that's closed off. I think that the idea behind a lease renewal scope of work is that we take everything that we can think of into account. And so, if aesthetics can be added to that in terms of specifications, then that's the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I mean, minor things. We're not talking about things that would necessarily increase the cost of this significantly. But I do think it's something to take into consideration and, as you look at these sites.
I don't disagree. I mean, some of you can feel the date of the work that was done on the outside, and so in many cases, I think there's an opportunity to come up with something that looks better. So, we're open to that, absolutely. It's not our primary focus when we do it, but it's certainly something that's worth considering.
Commissioner Arfon.
This administration really has made one of its hallmarks on the universal pre-K and talking about mental health and early childhood and attachment and all the things that go along with preschool activity, and daycare falls squarely into that. And everything you've described is a really good reactive response, an audit, a system to take the audit and put it into action. But where are the big thinking ideas that get turned into space plans for a field of study, pre-K and early childhood, that probably has evolved considerably since these buildings were first constructed? Where in this chain can you take ideas about children growing things and the things that are the big ideas about having these children grow up into really outstanding New York adults? Where does that happen? Does it?
That happens. Mm-hmm. That happens in our early care and education division. They are always absolutely in the forefront of thinking with regard to taking care of children and training staff to manage that.
I have no doubt about that, but where does that get translated into any capital ideas or needs that are perhaps an opportunity at a lease renewal to happen? And I use the example of growing things because that's the first one that comes to mind. How does that, is it something that happens at Department of Design and Construction, or is it something that happens in your child care division? Where do the big ideas that are spaces or capital is needed to produce in the space, where does that happen?
Yeah, that happens between our early care and education unit and the provider community. They're the ones who collaborate on that. They come to us if they wanted to make tweaks to the space to accommodate that. But they're, of course, our partners, so every scope of work that we do is done in collaboration with them.
Okay, well, that's helpful to hear, because it wasn't really clear that there was much other than making sure the health and safety was fine, and I think this is a whole other category.
Well, they're on there. They're on my CC list, and we absolutely reach out to them and work very closely with them on every decision, on every site.
Commissioner Besser.
Thank you. Have you considered including the first right of refusal to purchase in your leases?
First right of refusal has come up once or twice already, and we've utilized it to purchase, 595 Clinton was one, but I don't know if the other one, Dumont, had a first right. Did it? So already twice since I was last year, we've used that.
That's great, because some owners may not even be aware that you would consider purchasing, so.
If we hear they're selling, we go into an assessment, because there's a risk, obviously, when there's a sell, that, we could lose the site because of a change of approach. So we obviously want to avoid that. Yeah.
I had a,
Sorry. So we, in light of the last two sites, we have reached out to landlords to encourage the consideration so that they don't cut a deal without us knowing, right? So we have the opportunity to make a purchase.
yes, Commissioner Levin.
Did you have a question? I didn't want to take a second bite.
Please.
Well, a short second bite. We hear a lot about gentrification and driving up rental prices and hard to find affordable space to live. Is the city getting gentrified in its lease renewal discussions with landlords?
Yes.
And what are we doing about it?
Whenever we can, we're buying.
Okay. So if that's, in fact, it
part
was
of
the
the
conversation
dynamic.
about buying that triggered the thought.
The rents are going up, and so sometimes it's just gotten too expensive, and the analysis comes out that it's cheaper to buy.
Okay. And are there locations that you've decided you just have to give up on because you can't get them renew them on reasonable terms?
Not yet.
I just had a numbers question. I was struck by the fact that 76 of your locations are leases, so that's the potential universe that we might see. And when you gave us that helpful chart of ULURP approvals, it covers a total of 48. And so I wondered, where are these other 28 city lease sites?
I believe they don't require ULURP renewal. They've got a permanent ULURP.
Got it, the original approval was evergreen. Thanks. Well, thank you very much for the time. This was quite informative, and we'll look forward to your follow-up.
Thank you.
Item number 1 on the review session agenda is the Shirley Chisholm Childhood Education Center. Anthony Grande of the Brooklyn office is here to present the application for acquisition of the building for continued use as a daycare center.
Good afternoon. ACS and DCAS are seeking the
Unbought and unbossed.
acquisition of an existing building located at 69 to 71 Saratoga Avenue in the Ocean Hill neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 16, to facilitate the continued operation of a child care center. ACS and its predecessor agency, Human Resources Administration, has operated a child care center at this location since 1973. A previous application was approved by the City Planning Commission and the City Council in September 1993 with a term of up to 20 years. The existing lease expired in May 2015. Project area consists of Block 1498, Lot 6, with frontage on Saratoga Avenue and Macon Street. It is located in an R6 zoning district. The land uses in the surrounding area are primarily residential, characterized by a mix of single and two-family homes, in addition to larger apartment buildings. Saratoga Avenue contains retail uses along the corridor in mixed-use buildings. Most retail in the area is along Broadway, 1 block to the east. Adjacent to the project area to the north, across Macon Street, is the 13-story New York City Housing Authority Saratoga Square development. To the south and to the west across Saratoga Avenue are mixed-use buildings with ground floor retail. Adjacent to the project area to the east are 2-story single or two-family buildings. To the northwest of the project area is Saratoga Square Park, a DPR-owned mapped park. The project area is well served by transit with the Halsey Street J-Line station 2 blocks to the northeast. The Shirley Chisholm Childhood Education Center occupies the entire 2-story privately owned building, including cellar and rooftop play area. It comprises a total of 28,000 square feet, including 19,000 square feet of interior space and 9,000 square feet of rooftop play area. The building has 2 entrance egress doors, the primary entrance on Saratoga Avenue and the secondary egress on the building's Macon Street frontage. There are 3 classrooms for 4-year-old children on the first floor and 2 classrooms for 3-year-old children on the second floor, along with the primary reception area. Each classroom has its own children's bathroom facility. The Shirley Chisholm Childhood Education Center serves up to 85 preschoolers, ages 3 to 4, under a license from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. The children may attend the facility from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and are transported to and from the daycare by their parents or guardians. The center provides the following services to the children: meal service, including breakfast, lunch, and daily snack; supervised playtime, during which children are encouraged to become active in indoor and outdoor play activities such as art, music, and computer skills; education, using the creative curriculum to enhance children's physical, cognitive, social, and emotional development. It has an open policy of ongoing communication and collaborative partnership with parents and the community. The center is operated by 30 professional, paraprofessional, and support staff. The first floor also includes offices, a commercial kitchen, which is shown here, and a secondary reception area. The rooftop contains approximately 9,000 square feet of fully enclosed play space. Department of City Planning staff toured the facility on June 22nd, 2017, with ACS and Daycare Center program staff, and confirmed the facility was in a state of good repair. Again, to facilitate the continued use of the facility, the applicants request an acquisition via lease of property containing the Shirley Chisholm Childhood Education Center for a term of 10 years. Thank you.
Questions from the commission? Okay, this application is certified.
Item number 2 on page 22 of your package is the Shirley Chisholm Daycare Center. Anthony Grande is going to present this also, and it's also an acquisition for continued use of a daycare center.
It's the This is the Shirley Chisholm Daycare Center number 1. ACS and DCAS are seeking the acquisition of an existing building located at 2023 Pacific Street in the Ocean Hill neighborhood of Brooklyn, Community District 16, to facilitate the continued operation of a child care center. ACS and its predecessor agency, Human Resources Administration, has operated a child care center at this location since 1973. A previous application was approved by the City Planning Commission in November 1992 with a term of up to 20 years. The existing lease expired in September 2015. The project area consists of block 1431, lot 54, at a mid-block site on Pacific Street between Ralph Avenue and Howard Avenue. It is located in an R6 C13 zoning district. The land uses in the surrounding area are primarily residential, characterized by a mix of single and two-family homes, in addition to some larger apartment buildings. The site borders an M11 district to the north, which runs along Atlantic Avenue and contains primarily commercial uses. Adjacent to the project area to the west is a house of worship, and to the east are 4-story apartment buildings. Directly across Pacific Street are the 6-story NYCHA Kingsborough buildings with, in addition to the South Pacific Playground, which is a DBR-owned mapped park. The project area is well served by transit with the Ralph Avenue C line station 3 blocks to the north. The Shirley Chisholm Daycare Center number 1 occupies the entire 2-story privately owned building, including outdoor play areas in the side yard and on the roof. It comprises a total of approximately 33,000 square feet, including 24,000 square feet of interior space and 3,000 square feet at the ground level, outdoor play area, and 6,000 square feet of rooftop play area. The building has 3 entrance egress doors, all on the Pacific Street frontage. There are 2 classrooms in the cellar that can accommodate the after-school program. There are 4 classrooms on the first floor, along with the primary reception area. There are 5 classrooms on the second floor. The Shirley Chisholm Daycare Center number 1 serves up to 114 preschoolers ages 6 months to 5 years under a license from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. The children may attend the facility from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and are transported to and from the facility by their parents or guardians. The center provides the following services to the children: meal service, including breakfast, lunch, and daily snack; supervised playtime, during which children are encouraged to become active in indoor and outdoor play activities such as art, music, and computer skills; education using the teaching strategies goals to enhance children's physical, cognitive, social, and emotional development. It has an open policy of ongoing communication and collaborative partnership with parents in the community. The center is operated by 44 professional, paraprofessional, and support staff. The first and second floor contain offices, and the second floor also includes a commercial kitchen, which is shown here. The rooftop contains approximately 6,000 square feet of fully enclosed play space, and the side yard contains approximately 3,000 square feet of enclosed play space at grade with the street, shown in the photo. Department of City Planning staff toured the facility on May 10th, 2017 with ACS and Daycare Center program staff and confirmed the facility was in a state of good repair. Again, to facilitate the continued use of the facility, the applicants request an acquisition via lease of property containing the Shirley Chisholm Daycare Center number 1 for a term of 10 years.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi. Thank you very much. Perhaps this is out of order. There might be more appropriate first questions, but you know, earlier I had mentioned the sort of exterior conditions of some of these spaces, and I think this is one example of, you know, a building that clearly could use some thought with respect to the exterior of the space. I mean, the windows, you know, the grates on the windows on both the side of the building, which is, you know, has a protected interior courtyard, and the windows, the very, very few windows facing the street. You know, the barbed wire, I understand there are issues of security, but, you know, I think we should aspire to a little bit more for our children, particularly children that are taking advantage of city services who probably are doing so because other options are limited for them. So I'd just like to raise that issue that I understand, you know, is not your issue, but just for consideration here.
In preparing for this, it's such an evident observation. It does talk about how much our city has evolved from the 1970s, when this was probably a building type that gave comfort.
That's right.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
I have to ask, given the very similar names of this application and the one before, are these under common, same service provider, or how come they've got the same name?
They're not the same service provider, but they just have a similar name.
Are they related in any way?
I don't think so. I think ACS could probably speak more
find
about
out later.
that as
Point
far
of
as
curiosity.
naming.
I mean,
naming
it's a good name.
It
Spread
is.
it around,
Yeah.
but.
I can answer that question if you like.
Commissioner Marin.
Anthony, I happen to share Commissioner Ortiz's thoughts about the aesthetics of the building, and I do happen to agree with Commissioner Lago. These were probably built in the 70s when a different mindset was probably safety of the children, and I understand that. But again, you know, they're really uninviting, and I know there's certain things that you can't do because you're in a lease with the person who may own that building, and it's not amenable to aesthetics versus health and safety. But I think that we as a city has a couple of options. Like, I noticed this site doesn't show any trees, any street trees. Is there any possibility of talking to the Department of Parks, getting some street trees in front of the building? I mean, anything that can make it more inviting. It's just cold, it's concrete, it's uninviting. So if a conversation could be started with Park with someone about street trees, I mean, that would be sure appreciated.
Yeah, and I think ACS could initiate that conversation. and TCAS as well.
Yes, Commissioner Arfon.
Not about aesthetics, though I agree with everything said so far, but really just a question piggybacking off of Commissioner Levin's point about gentrification and the risk here. We know that Ocean Hill is adjacent to East New York. There is a lot of real estate pressure mounting. Is there a particular reason, or will we hear in a public hearing why it's a 10-year lease and not longer?
I have not been given a rationale for the 10-year lease, but we could hear about that in the public hearing from ACS and DCAS.
Other questions? Okay, Commissioner Cantor.
Thank you. Has any thought been given to creating an architectural allowance for something creative to be done at that site?
To my knowledge, no.
And would any architectural allowance lower your budget?
I don't have a budget for that. I think that ACS, based on the, no, I understand. So based on what we heard from ACS in the previous presentation, I think that, you know, they're looking at the exterior of the building when they're developing the scope of work. But I'm not sure how that, you know, interplays with the budget that they have for each project.
But we're being asked to approve what we see.
Yes.
So they can talk successfully, they can talk unsuccessfully, or we're beyond the process, or behind the process.
Right, so there is a scope of work.
The opportunity that we have is now.
Yes.
I think it would be good if you could come back with their thoughts on where they're going aesthetically. What, if anything, they've allowed in a budget? When they believe that they would have their decision or preliminary sketch of their improvements? Because I share the concern of my colleagues. That looks like a blank wall that's just waiting to be used for either handball or graffiti. And neither were terribly appealing at the moment.
Yeah, so with the comments about the aesthetics of the building, I think that when we hear from the applicants on the application, they'll be prepared to address that.
Thank you.
Anyone else before I jump the gun again? Yes, Commissioner Muddy.
Another question, but I'm sure you're not going to be able to answer this, but ACS is in the audience, so they can come back later at another date. It doesn't have to be right away, but we have a daycare center such as this. It's in an R6 district. It's a daycare center. You lease it out for another 20 years. What is the how do I phrase the question? There are development rights on the site. What happens to the balance of those development rights? Are they kept? Do they get, if they're next to something that gets developed, do they get sold off? And again, I don't expect an answer right now, but it's just some food for thought, because there are some centers that you indicated you're purchasing, and ACS is purchasing. And so they do come with some development rights, just food for thought.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Well, to quote Commissioner Mudine, I'm glad that ACS is here because there is a lot of food for thought, and these issues will certainly come up at the public hearing. Thank you. So this application is certified.
Item number 3 on page 44 of your package is in Manhattan at 449 Broadway, is a special permit to allow retail use on portions of the ground floor and cellar of a building in an M15 district. Annie White of the Manhattan office will tell us about the project.
So, good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application for a special permit for a property located at 449 Broadway in Community District 2 in the Borough of Manhattan. The applicant for this project is 449 Broadway LLC. The property is located in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District and currently has an underlying zoning of M15B. This is a special permit to allow use group 6 commercial use on the ground floor and cellar, totaling approximately 8,000 square feet of an existing 5-story building. Here is an area map where the property is located, or is indicated in the black dotted line. It is located on Broadway between Howard Street to the south and Grand Street to the north, just 2 blocks north of Canal Street. It's a through-block lot with facades on both Broadway and Mercer. The underlying zoning district, as I said, is M15B, which permits light industrial and commercial uses as of right up to 5 FAR and community facility uses up to 6.5 FAR. Residential uses in use group 2 are not permitted as of right. And in the M15B district, use group 6, retail uses are not permitted as of right below the level of the second floor. The area surrounding the project site generally contains 4 to 8-story loft buildings along Broadway, Grand, Mercer, and Howard Streets. The ground floors of most of these buildings are occupied by retail establishments. Broadway, in particular, is replete with clothing stores and boutiques that serve both local shopping needs and as a regional shopping destination. On the same block as the project site, there's a newly constructed office building with ground floor retail located at 433 Broadway. The subject building has no certificate of occupancy. According to the applicant, the ground floor and the cellar of the building have been vacant since 2010, while the upper floors are currently occupied by as-of-right office uses. The applicant proposes to use approximately 4,000 square feet of floor area in the cellar and approximately 4,100 square feet of floor area on the ground floor for use group 6 retail. Office uses will remain on the upper floors and the building's bulk will remain unchanged. A special permit pursuant to 74-781 requires findings that the owner has made a good faith effort to rent the space to as-of-right uses at fair market rentals for a period of no less than 1 year for buildings over 3,600 square feet, which this qualifies. So between March of 2016 and March of 2017, the applicant advertised the availability of the cellar and ground floor of the building for as-of-right uses allowed pursuant to Section 4210 at fair market rental rate of $80 per square foot. The applicant's marketing efforts comprised multiple media resources, including advertisements placed in the New York Post and the Villager. The applicant also listed the space with 2 local brokers and undertook direct marketing to 12 local and citywide industry groups. According to the applicant, despite these efforts, there's been no inquiries, requests, or demand for use of the vacant space for as-of-right manufacturing use as of the date of filing the application. Here are the proposed drawings of the ground floor and cellar space that has the shaded area which would be qualified under this special permit. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yeah, my question goes to the sentence, there's a newly constructed office building at 433 Broadway, presumably in an N15 district, right? Same block?
I believe so.
And it has ground floor retail.
Yes.
So is that a subject of a special permit?
I would believe so. I can look into that project, what the action was to allow that.
Second, does the applicant, this 4,091 square feet, is the applicant proposing to have 2 retail spaces within the ground floor, like with on Mercer, an entrance and Broadway, or is it going to be 1 retail tenant?
I'm not sure about that. The drawings show 1 space without a demising wall between, so it doesn't have the fit out of the space, but that's something I can ask.
That's a very long space. Yeah.
Commissioner Dwight.
I'll just state that I was pleased to see that the New York Post and the Villager were included in the marketing efforts. I think this applicant has come a long way from its prior applications, and I'm pleased to see the progress on it.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi. You know, there's a mention of, we've seen this sort of 12 organizations are often on the list of who you're reaching out to. I'm sort of curious how that list is determined, acknowledging all the problems with this particular special permit. You know, because it just seems to me we should recognize that a number of these organizations, in particular the business improvement districts, are not in the business of working with manufacturing businesses, being engaged in any kind of leasing activity, even when it comes to retail businesses often. So it strikes me that there's a real disconnect between who's receiving these, you know, for example, I don't see the Urban Manufacturing Alliance or others. So, you know, if we're going to have a list like this, I think it should be vetted a little more thoughtfully. to reflect organizations that do in fact have relationships with manufacturing firms.
And Commissioner Ortiz, if we could follow up with you on that in case you have suggestions for other organizations.
That's not my area of expertise. I imagine Commissioner Efron would have more to say on that. All I know is one of them, but it's just that I do know bids, and that's who I think shouldn't be on here.
Happy to do it, though. I don't think any of them would realistically list space that's $80 a square foot.
That's the other issue, yeah. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Dwight.
So just to go back to the $80 square foot number, it would be helpful, and this is public information, if on future applications, we can get the amount on a per square foot basis of the real estate taxes that the property owner pays for that property. So we would understand better their profit and loss. You know, we could be asking them to go out for a lower rent, but their real estate taxes might be $20, $25 a foot, and we don't know that. So it is public information, so if we can get that, it would help us in determining the proper course of action. Thank you.
Commissioner Money.
I'd like to follow up on what Commissioner Dwight just said. So understanding that maybe they are going out there and not finding, I guess like the question is an $80 rent a rent that a manufacturing tenant would pay? So if you're setting a rent based on other factors, maybe this isn't a fair market rate for manufacturing, which is why you can't find a tenant, which is why you wind up at retail.
I believe the $80 is based on analysis of what similar manufacturing spaces are paying in Manhattan, specifically looking at places like Garment Center.
And who's done that study?
I don't want to misspeak, so I'm not sure.
If we can get some information on that, that would be very helpful, because that's something we've been grappling with for the past couple of months here. The rent of a manufacturing space turning to retail, offering it in a document, in a paper at $80 a rent, $80 a foot for rent, and we don't get the manufacturing tenant because they can't afford that. So there's a catch-22 here that we need to resolve somehow.
Recognizing that we're not in the realm of setting up, we don't have commercial rent control.
No, I understand that, but it would help us to understand better why these spaces are not being rented and why they're being converted. Mm-hmm. And of course, that lends also to the study that eventually the department is doing of the Soho district and the 74-711 application.
I believe our house HEIP has looked into this and confirmed that 80 per square foot seems right for areas like Garment Center, but I can confirm.
Other questions? Okay, application is certified.
Item number 4 on page 75 of your package is the Special West Chelsea District Text Amendment. Annie White will stay to present that also, and this is to allow support space for the High Line to be provided in lieu of public access, elevators and stairway.
Hello again. So this is an application for a text amendment to modify sections relating to lots adjacent to the High Line in subdistricts D, E, and G of the Special West Chelsea District and Manhattan Community District 4. So the co-applicants for this application are the Department of Parks and Recreation and Friends of the High Line. The application is in conjunction with the development at 515 West 18th Street, an approximately 500,000 square foot mixed-use building by the related companies. The proposed text amendment would modify sections of Special West Chelsea to allow an operations and support facility, referred to as the alternate facility, for Friends of the High Line to be provided at the site in lieu of a public access elevator and stair. These are the 4 sections of the zoning resolution that are proposed to be modified. Currently, these provisions require that any development on the proposed site provide a public access, i.e. a stair and elevator to the High Line. However, Friends of the High Line and Department of Parks and Recreation have determined that a stair and elevator are redundant at this site, and it may be better serve the High Line and the public through the support facilities. And I'll expand on a little bit more of what's included in that later in the presentation. The development site outlined here in red is located between 18th and 19th Street on the west side of 10th Avenue, is bisected by the High Line, which runs approximately 100 feet in from 10th Avenue. It is in subareas E and G of the Special West Chelsea District, which are zones C6-2. However, the portion of the site that will hold this alternate facility is the most northwestern corner of the site along 19th Street, which is the shaded portion here adjacent to the High Line. There are some additional site photos that show both at grade where the building will sit adjacent to the High Line, and also at the level of the High Line where the alternate facility will connect to the High Line bed. So for some background, this development at 515 West 18th Street has previously received a chair certification in December of last year for a High Line improvement bonus to be used on the zoning lot. To receive this bonus in floor area, the applicant must provide a stair and elevator and also give a monetary contribution to the High Line Improvement Fund. However, at the time of the chair certification, there was also an alternate facility agreement signed by the applicants, Parks, and Related, which outlined that if this proposed text amendment is enacted, Related will seek a new chair certification that will amend the current certification to require that the alternate facility be built for the floor area bonus in lieu of the stair and elevator. The monetary contribution to the High Line Improvement Fund remains unchanged. So through the West Chelsea zoning in 2005, multiple public access points were identified along the High Line, which are to be built out concurrently with development on each identified lot. Because of this, multiple points of public access will be provided in the immediate vicinity of the site. So here is the proposed site at between 18th and 19th Street, outlined here in red. And as you can see, these are the multiple public access points along the High Line. So there is currently a stair 1 block north on 20th Street, in addition to a temporary stair 1 block south at 18th Street. The site at 18th Street is slated for redevelopment, and it will be the 18th Street Plaza, which will be a kind of a grand stair and elevator, which is supposed to be a kind of primary access to the High Line at this point. However, there is no substantial maintenance and operation space for Friends of the High Line above the terminus at Gansevoort Street. The applicants believe that the 19th Street site provides a unique opportunity for critical operation space as the park continues to develop and expand to the north. Here is a basic spatial plan to show how the alternate facility will fit into the footprint of the building in comparison to the previously proposed stair and elevator. Addition drawings have been included, a section in elevation to show the alternate facility in relationship to the level of the High Line, and also the facade treatment of the elevation. You can see the elevation material will be consistent over the space and have a quite minimal entrance into the facility, as it will only be for staff. Related is working closely with Friends of the High Line to design the space that will best fit the needs and dimensional requirements of the High Line maintenance space, and it will provide support for the ongoing maintenance and programming through amenities such as a field office, staff restrooms and lockers, a workshop space for horticulture management, support space for public educational programs, and other utilities necessary for the daily High Line operations. At its full board meeting on June 7th, Manhattan Community Board 4 voted in favor of a resolution recommending approval of the application, and on July 5th, the Manhattan Borough President issued a recommendation to approve the application. The letters have been included in your briefing package, including the memo that was received on Friday. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Annie, I had a question that I asked at certification, and then I went and did my homework on it.
Okay.
When we approved the Chelsea Market overbuild back in 2012, that text amendment included a commitment also to build support space, 3,000 square feet of support space for the High Line. I'm curious to know how this space relates to those plans. That space hasn't been built yet and doesn't have to be provided to the High Line until the Chelsea Market overbuild project gets going, and who knows how long that will take. But since that was a commitment that was made at that location, I imagine it would also still be very helpful to the High Line, and we shouldn't create any impression here. Well, I hope this isn't a replacement for that, and if that's not the case, we should make that clear.
It certainly hasn't been framed as a replacement. I'm not sure. I think they want to have the support space as soon as possible, which is we know the site's going, but
Yeah.
Friends of the High Line will be here. We could address that on Wednesday.
Maybe they can clarify that. Thank you.
Commissioner Cantor.
Thank you. Under the existing conditions, how far apart are elevators up and down the line?
So there'll be an elevator at 18th Street, and I believe it's 7 blocks to the north.
if we have an elderly or a disabled person, how far would they have to walk today to get to an exit, to get to an elevator?
I believe it's a couple more blocks, maybe, so there would be a gap. If the 18th Street, since 18th Street is not yet built, I believe it would be 1 block more, so 9 blocks, but I can have Friends of the High Line confirm what's available.
That's significantly more than the average, right? Than the others?
Significantly more than other breaks along the High Line, or?
Yes.
Because there is also a large kind of gap between the northern portion and this portion as well, I believe. But I think that only the green have the elevators, but I can confirm.
Okay.
To address Commissioner Cantor's questions, it would be helpful to have the friend of the High Line talk about what permanent facilities are and also what temporary facilities are in place now.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, this will come to a public hearing on Wednesday.
Okay. Item number 5, also for pre-hearing review, is the Police Department 107th Street parking lot. The site selection and acquisition of property to facilitate a new parking garage for the Police Department and the Lexington Gardens 2 development. Edwin Marshall of the Manhattan office will present it, and it is on page 109 of your package.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The New York City Police Department is seeking site selection and acquisition approval to site a police parking facility located at 127 East 107th Street. The parking facility is located within East Harlem, Manhattan Community District 11. The siting of this facility would serve several investigative and specialty response units that are with the NYPD on a facility that's located directly south of the parking lot at 104 East 107th Street. The parking facility is outlined in the red. It's located on the east side of Park Avenue between 107th and 108th Streets. The NYPD facility is located right here, and you can see that the site is zoned R9. This image shows an aerial of the parking facility outlined in red. The parking facility has been used by the NYPD through an informal agreement with HPD since 2004. The parking lot has 88 vehicles. 58 of the vehicles are used by HPD and 30 are used by the NYPD. The specialty offices that serve several specialty and investigative units is located here, directly across the street from the parking facility at 104 East 107th Street. And the rest of the block is developed with a parking lot that serves Lexington Gardens 1, and this is Lexington Gardens 1, which was built in 1985. This shows an image of the existing built condition, what's happening in the larger neighborhood. The Commission can see the parking site, which is outlined in red. You have Lexington Gardens 1 here. You have the Clinton houses, which are located north, which has about 749 units. And across Park Avenue, you have public housing as well. And on the east side of Lexington Avenue, you have buildings that rise between 4 to 5 stories with ground floor retail. This image shows the existing condition of the parking lot. You can see the Priuses that are managed and owned by HPD, and also some police parking vehicles in there as well. And you can see the Clinton houses, which abuts up to the north. Now, the parking facility would be a 2-story garage that would be contained within the Lexington Garden 2 project. It would have access from East 107th Street. There would be 32 parking spaces. 4 spaces would be placed at grade, and the remaining 28 spaces would be placed on the second level. As I said in my opening remarks, this parking facility serves several specialty units. The Commission can see the units in the bullets, the Manhattan North Traffic Enforcement Unit, the Firearm Suppression Division, the Weapons of Mass Destruction Unit, and the Central Intelligence Unit. This image shows the Lexington Gardens 2 footprint, and you can see the entrance to the parking facility off of 107th Street. This is the ground floor plan. You can see the footprint of the parking facility. 107th Street is a one-way street heading westbound. This is Park Avenue, and this is Lexington Avenue. Police vehicles using the garage would enter. This is 107th Street. They would enter here. 4 parking spaces are at grade on the first level, and then there's a ramp up, which goes to the second level, where the remaining 28 cars would be parked. This is the ramp up, and then these are the remaining 28 spaces here. One last thing, just going back. This is the ground floor. You'll notice that there are parking spaces here. This is a solid wall that separates the parking facility space from residential accessory parking. These are 28 spaces, 25 to 28 spaces. They were put there with an agreement between HPD and HUD so that Lexington Gardens 1 would have some accessory residential parking. That would be right here, and that's accessible from Park Avenue. So in terms of public review, this application was certified on March 20th. Community Board 11 did not hold a public hearing, and they did not submit a recommendation. They did not express any concerns or issues. We know that this was vetted and was discussed as part of the Lexington Gardens 2 project, which the Community Board voted for. So the Community Board also supports the NYPD parking facility. On June 29, 2007, the Borough President submitted a recommendation to approve this application with modifications.
And questions from commissioners? Yes, Vice Chair Knuckles.
Well, Edwin, this is for ACS, but I'll ask it in their presence. And I note the inclusion of the residential parking component, but I was wondering whether or not the city would acquire this space as a condominium interest, so it would guarantee that there'd be a long-term parking solution, as opposed to leasing it. Do you know?
I do not know, but DCAS will be at the public hearing on Wednesday, so they might be able to answer that more specifically. But what I can tell you is that this will be acquired through a 20-year lease with an option to renew.
20 years goes by very quickly, as I can attest anyway. So,
other questions? Okay, this will then go to a public hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Item number 6 for pre-hearing review, Morris Park Business Improvement District, on page 173 of your package, will establish a new bid along Morris Park Avenue in the Bronx. Kendall Moses is making her first presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am Kendall Moses with HEIP. I normally work on the consolidated plan, but today I'm presenting the proposed Morris Park Business Improvement District. The proposed Morris Park Business Improvement District is located in the central east part of the Bronx within the Morris Park neighborhood. It's a former race course and airfield. The neighborhood became a residential subdivision during the 1920s through the 1970s. And it's represented by council members James Vaca and Richie Torres. Morris Park is in Bronx Community Board 11. The proposed bid expands along Morris Park Avenue from Unionport Road to the west to Williamsbridge Road in the east. The district's 188 properties would include 152 commercial and mixed-use properties, 25 residential properties, 8 government and/or nonprofit organizations, as well as 3 vacant lots. The proposed bid is located in a low-density R4 and R5 district with C1 and C2 commercial overlays. The proposed district is characterized by neighborhood-scale retail and entertainment, small family-owned businesses. The commercial corridor is pedestrian-friendly, with most businesses on the first floor. The top 5 business types are food and entertainment at 23%, beauty, hair, and nail salons at 14%, professional services at 12%, medical and pharmacy at 10%, and hardware, auto, and appliance stores at 9%. The proposed bid will provide services such as marketing and special events, The sponsor provided these photos, pictures of the Columbus Day Parade that runs along Morris Park Avenue. It's an annual parade currently organized by the Morris Park Community Association, and the proposed bid is looking to take it over once it's established. In addition, during the proposed bid's first year, they will provide beautification, public safety, maintenance, and sanitation services as well. These are pictures that sponsor provided as examples of the need for the establishment of the bid. Also, for a proposed first-year budget, they will provide, of course, administrative and advocacy services. These are just reflective of the business community along the avenue. The proposed bid's first-year budget is anticipated to be about $390,000, with admin and advocacy at 24%, marketing and special events at 28%, maintenance and sanitation at 38%, beautification at 7%, and public safety at 3% of the first-year bid budget. The proposed bid's budget is supported by an assessment on property owners within the district, with commercial and mixed-use property owners paying according to a formula based on the lot front footage at an approximate rate of $42.5 per front foot, plus $300 per corner and $300 for commercial space on the second floor or above. Residential properties would pay a flat dollar fee. Vacant lots are charged $300 fee or $600 if it's on a corner, and government and nonprofit are exempt. According to the sponsor, the estimated charges will be at maximum about $15,000, minimum about $500, and an average of about $2,500. A steering committee for the bid was established and created in 2013. They garnered support for the bid through door-to-door visits, public meetings, mailings, letters of support. Over half of the assessed property owners responded to active solicitation, with 92% of them responding affirmatively and 90% responding commercial property owners in support. And hope I didn't go too fast.
Commissioner Efron.
Thank you for being concise. I suppose we'll hear tomorrow from those who are organizing the bid, which is the existing neighborhood community association.
The steering committee and SBS will be here on Wednesday.
If they could just talk about the security, I see it's only $10,000, but it's such a long district. It would be curious to hear how they plan to handle their security tomorrow.
I believe that they're looking to do maybe some cameras and a community watch as well, but they can expand more on that on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi. A few questions for Wednesday, just to put them out there. One, I'm curious, there are a number of medical campuses, you know, that are mentioned. In the past, we have asked about, you know, pilot contributions from those organizations. They're not required to make contributions, of course, but often they see it's in their best interest to support an organization like this. So I'm curious if any conversations or thought has been given to asking for payment in lieu of taxes, which is a pilot. The other is, you know, I noticed that administration and advocacy set aside is 24%. You know, so that's $95,000 for an executive director, community liaison, clerical, bookkeeping, and special staff, as stated here. I'd like to know if there's some administrative or staff time embedded in the 295, which is the other piece, because sometimes that's what is done in the budget, but we don't have information in the deeper line items, just to make sure that, of course, there's adequate staff, that we are able to hire somebody who can do this job well, this is a profession now. I'm running business improvement districts, and we want to make sure that they see the impact they're hoping for with a good staff member. So it's the second question. And then I have a question that I'm grappling with that I've heard more recently. Is there, you mentioned that commercial mixed-use properties are assessed. So when you say mixed use, as I look at how the formula is laid out, when it's a mixed-use property and there's residential upstairs, where does that fall in this assessment? Because I've heard that some property owners are figuring out legal ways to reclassify their properties or condo residential so that they significantly reduce their contribution. And I'm wondering if you've seen this and if that plays out here. It was just a little something I heard out there.
I don't know about that last part of your second question about the condos, but the property determination of who's paying the assessment is based on the land use determination of the lot. So if there is some residential above the, like say, on the second or third floor, if the lot is considered then to still just be mixed use, they would have to pay the mixed use fee.
But if you condo, the upper stories, and, how does that,
So here, what's happening is it's a front footage, straight front footage
I
chart.
see that, yeah.
Only would you pay an additional $300 if you have commercial upstairs. If you have residential upstairs, there's no additional fee, so there's no particular reason to do a condo to avoid a bid fee, because you wouldn't pay one way or the other.
So this depends entirely on how the formula, the assessment formula is set up.
Well, it always does, that's how the formulas are written. But in this case, they're really only looking to assess basically ground floor retail with a slight extra charge if you have like an office upstairs.
So this assessment formula avoids that problem?
Well, the idea here is not to have any burden on the residents. It's really to deal with the commercial.
Along those lines, if there's a class here set aside for residents, they have voting rights. Right. I presume that's tied to the fact that they in fact do contribute, right? You can't vote if you don't contribute.
They pay a $1 flat fee, and there are some properties within the district that are 100% residential. So those properties are in the district, they're on Morris Park Avenue, they would pay $1, and they do get a representative on the board.
Okay, so there's a balance between wanting them to contribute something so that they have a seat at the table and a say, but maintaining the majority of the assessment coming from commercial.
Well, traditionally, and there's been some back and forth on this, is that with bids, we've tried to avoid taxing residents and try to keep this as a commercial program. That's a discussion that, because particularly in a place like Manhattan, there's a lot of high-rise residential, which are in bids, and there's a question, well, how much should those residents pay? In most cases, they don't pay. In some cases, they do. But here, this is strictly about small mom-and-pop businesses and providing services to them. It's not really about servicing the residents. It's not really the goal here.
Yeah. So, the issue that I heard raised was in a sort of similar market with, low scale, mom and pops on the ground floor, and there's a real concern about what property owners were doing to avoid assessment. So I just raise it as something to think about, and it's not an issue here, it's a bigger issue though.
Yes.
No, we'd welcome getting more details about that. Thank you. Other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, this then will come to the public hearing on Wednesday.
Item number 7 on page 177 of your package is the Lower Concourse North rezoning coming for pre-hearing review. It's to construct an affordable housing, commercial, office space project with publicly accessible open space along the Harlem River. James Morale of the Bronx office will make a presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This application was certified on March 20th. It was filed by the NYC EDC and NYC DCAS. for a disposition, a zoning map change, text amendments, and a special permit to facilitate new affordable housing. Part of the text amendment is to extend the special Harlem River Waterfront District, shown here in red. The extension is the stripe to the north. The special district's goals are to ensure development maintains a human scale, guarantee a variety of building structures, facilitate a strong streetscape, and ensure a wide range of uses on the waterfront. You might recall that on June 5th, the Commission certified a DCP-led text amendment to update and expand this district to the south. The district's main purposes are to ensure bulk regulations that ensure a particular type of building form, a waterfront access plan, a mapped park, and tower orientation rules. Recently, the city, under Mayor de Blasio, has committed approximately $195 million to the lower concourse in an investment strategy. If you look at number one, part of that investment strategy is the mapped park that was part of the original Harlem River Waterfront District, between $70 and $90 million. Acquisitions are underway there. Part of the investment strategy are street and infrastructure improvements, shown here as the number 2 in brown. 70 to 90 million have been allocated for reconstruction of key intersections, updating the water and sewer lines, updating streetscapes, and a design team kicked off this spring concerning this matter. Part number 3 of this investment strategy is a broadband access, 5 to 10 million for the entire area. And finally, fourth is the lower concourse site at the north, which is the subject of this application. The EDC has engaged with the Community Boards 1 and Community Board 4 in over 15 meetings over the last 2 years, approximately, to get to this point. The land use it's vacant right now. To the west is the river, to the north is a Mill Pond Park. There are commercial uses, industrial uses, and housing. The actions requested are a disposition, as I said, for 986,000 square feet of the site, shown in red here, through sale or long-term lease. The rezoning, of course, from the M21 to an R72 C25 with the extension of the special district to the north on the site. And of course, the text amendment itself. The text amendment is mainly to extend the Harlem River waterfront via a north subdistrict. The north subdistrict has tight bulk controls of what can be built there. It has an open space waterfront access plan, has special use regulations, parking regulations. The text amendment will also establish mandatory inclusionary housing on this site. In terms of the waterfront access plan, there's the minimum 40-foot shore public walkway. There is a supplemental area that will be contiguous with the existing Mill Pond Park to the north. There is a visual corridor and an upland connection to be accommodated along the former 150th Street. So this open space creates a contiguous, seamless transition from Mill Pond Park to the north. In terms of massing, we'll build up the massing shortly in a few slides, but the articulated buildings underneath are an absolute maximum build-out on this site. The ghosting, the blue ghosting that surrounds it, is just showing where the towers can slide as locational, as their location can be on their site. So let's take a look at that. The base height of the entire site is 85 feet, except for a 65-foot maximum along 20% of the shore public walkway to ensure a little bit more articulation. The rest of the building height is 85 feet as well, unless you do towers. If you do 2 towers, you can only do them in 2 locations. There's location A, which is to the south here. It can be, only 1 tower can be here. It can be 400 feet tall. It's got to be within 100 feet of 149th Street. It has a 10,000 square foot floor plate, and it has a 100-foot maximum width facing the shoreline. It also has tower top articulation rules. Tower B can be located anywhere in this red space, and it has a little bit more, a little looser sweater where it can be located. It can't be located within 60 feet of Tower A. It has a maximum height of 260 feet. It has a maximum aggregate tower width facing the shoreline of 185 feet, and a maximum aggregate width facing the northern park boundaries of 150 feet, and there are tower top articulation rules here too. Part of the text amendment is to change the uses allowed here. In this case, commercial uses will be allowed anywhere in the building except directly over residential uses. Now, this is to allow commercial uses to extend all the way up the rear floors of these buildings, which is facing the major Deegan, not a desirable spot for residential uses. There are also uses that, regulations that say that 30% of a building wall facing a street or a shore public walkway or an upland connection have to be active uses, which means non-residential uses. And within those active uses, 50% of that will have to be transparent. And where permitted, all parking and services areas shall be screened except for entrances not wider than 40 feet. This is a massing showing exactly how the building would lay out on the site as it intersects with the major Deegan. And this is a massing from across the Harlem River. Again, the ghosting just shows you the positions of where the towers can be located, whereas the building behind it is showing the a particular maximum build-out. Again, there's a special permit which waives parking, and the findings are in your package, but the three findings have to do with not causing traffic congestion, would facilitate the affordable housing, and would not have undue adverse effects on residences and businesses and community facilities in the area. There was an environmental impact statement. Two areas showed significant adverse impacts. One was public transportation, public schools, and the other was transportation. And mitigation for these impacts will be explored between DEIS and FEIS. At this point, it looks like the environmental impact statement is showing a full mitigation for the school impact, and that is through a commitment to monitoring and coordination with the SEA for a 5-year capital planning process, and continuing ongoing conversations with the SEA to identify a site in Subdistrict 3 here for a new school. Community Board 4 voted in favor with recommendations, 19 in favor, 17 opposed, and 5 abstaining. First of all, they asked that 100% of the project be affordable. Secondly, that the affordability range between 30% to 120% of AMI. Thirdly, that the building height for Tower A be limited to 300 feet. They asked that the city should fund community-based organizations to provide training for local residents and engage with the developers. They asked for a job preference for Community Board 4 residents, that the future developer be responsible for maintaining all of Mill Pond Park, and in order to avoid the school impacts, either reduce the number of units or fully mitigate the school impacts. They'd asked that parking spaces be allocated at lower rates for Community Board 4 residents at the local parking garages that were identified in the EIS. They asked that there be a community and a youth center on site. They asked for an assessment of the health centers in the area to see what their capacity is at the present time. They also asked for future community engagement by the city throughout the entire implementation process by a newly established Lower Concourse North Steering Committee. The recommendations are in your package and are more fully fleshed out there. The borough president voted in favor of the application with recommendations as well. The borough president asked that there be a minimum of 3 acres for open space, that the open space along the waterfront should exceed 40 feet minimum in width, that retail, transparency should exceed 50%, that the design of the project should pay homage to existing character, specifically Art Deco elements. They'd ask for more tower setbacks on the taller tower in Tower A position. He had asked for a range of affordability between 30% to 130% of AMI. He also asked that 40% of the units should be 2 and 3 bedrooms, that the unit size should be no less than 600 square feet, that if there is a community facility use there, it should celebrate Bronx culture in some manner. Also that such a use would be inviting for nighttime use, and that the whole development would be inviting for nighttime use. He would like special design consideration to all the areas underneath and facing the major Deegan, including a comprehensive lighting plan. He also recommended that the public access according to the HRW waterfront access plan be constructed, including all of the street trees and street furniture. And finally, a comprehensive redesign and construction of all the surrounding streets must be undertaken. That concludes my presentation.
Questions from commissioners? Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you. So, Jim, this is an application that has no designated developer.
At this point, a developer has not been designated, correct?
And there will be an RFP process
Well, there's an RFEI out now. There's always there's a possibility that they might go from RFEI straight to RFP. However, on Wednesday, the EDC colleagues who are in the audience now can fully answer exactly where that process is.
Okay, but the expectation is that the developer, however selected, will adhere fully to the requirements.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This was written in a way to say this is the envelope and here's what you have to do.
So no modification, don't expect to come back here and look for a special permit or any modification to what's prescribed here?
Right. Nothing is in play in that way at all. I mean, the complete idea here is that this envelope and these uses and this text controls everything, and that there's no expectation for anyone to go beyond what we're proposing here today to come back.
Of course, one of the problems is we don't get the opportunity to assess what the finished product is and the visual impact and physical impact of what would be a substantial complex on the immediate environment. So the city's taking a great deal of good faith in pursuing this particular path, is it not?
I would say that the special district really tightly controls anything that can go on the site, and that the EDC will, when selecting, will be looking to make sure whatever they select meets all the goals of the district and the commitments made to the community and to the borough president.
Commissioner Irfan.
Just building off that, will EDC address the borough president's recommendations and say whether or not they will be included in an RFP? Things such as unit sizes and square footage in particular.
Yeah, on Wednesday, they will certainly address all these questions. Again, they're in the audience, and we'll be able to answer these questions.
And will we be voting on it with those included, or?
The vote will be in August, so there'll be time to come back in pre-hearing or another.
Yeah, when I anticipate that after the public hearing, we'll have a pre-hearing review to on the issues that we identify. And that's it. Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi. You summarized the community board for recommendations, and I noted a few things were not listed here that were in their list, notably potential contribution to 153rd Street Bridge, space for community board for their offices, parking for units above 80%, a transit zone pilot. There are a few things. I'm curious what made this list and what didn't. Is this what's under consideration, or
my apologies. This was just me just summarizing the points I needed to summarize quickly.
Okay.
The recommendations are absolutely what are in your package, and all of those are on. This has what I listed here are in no way represented.
Okay.
My apologies. This in no way represents any kind of culling down.
The entirety of it.
Yeah,
okay.
No.
The other thing that I'll note is that as we look through recommendations, some are land use, some are beyond land use, and so that's another way that we parse through the recommendations. Yes, Commissioner Levin.
I have several questions. Fortunately, the vice chair asked one of the big things that was on my mind, and thank you for pointing out that we're being asked here by EDC to pre-approve a project. I understand that it makes sense from a developer standpoint. You might get more development interest if they don't have to go through the ULURP, but it's not unlike what we're being asked to do at the 126th Street, with 126th Street bus garage site, where we won't ever get to see it again, although there are other limitations beyond us. So that's one thing that I was concerned about. Thank you also for mentioning the work on the schools mitigation. It's clear that this project plus the site immediately to the south and several others are demonstrating a real need for a school here, and we have a responsibility before we unleash this development potential to be sure that the school capacity will eventually, has somehow been planned for and can be provided on an appropriate timeframe. I have questions for Wednesday about the open space and about the streetscape requirements. On the open space, how will the supplemental public access area relate to Mill Pond Park? Once it's fully built out, will it feel like it's in Mill Pond Park? Will park users even be aware that it has two different?
Right. The way, yes, it's a completely seamless transition. You will not see the difference. No fence, in other words, nothing. That the park will continue right through, right down the waterfront. That is the plan for it, for sure. I'm sure they can give you further details.
And no fence then between what will be perceived as Mill Pond Park and this development site?
Yeah,
You'll
no.
be able to flow through and around
That
both
is the plan.
buildings and-
That is the plan, unless things have...
Wonderful. And then on the streetscape requirements, the idea that only 30% of the building frontages have to have active uses.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which doesn't seem like very much, given a site that is, you know, a pretty heavily trafficked area. What is it called? Exterior street is really challenged, and some really good design interventions, I think, are going to be important there for making this successful.
And you have the
then on the
short public
waterfront side, you really want this to feel like active space, not like dead walls. So I'm curious why it was decided that 30% active uses would be sufficient. How does that compare to what we've required on other waterfront sites? And then within that 30%, only 50% of it has to be transparent. So you could end up with 15% transparency, which doesn't seem like a whole lot given the waterfront importance of these sites.
Right.
So how did that get baked into the
The urban design element of the 30% has to do with how large this site is.
Right.
You know, we have the entire street frontage, then the entire shore public walkway, then the entire visual corridor, and then the whole bridge side. If our urban design folks started, you know, modeling this out, and if in fact we went higher on an active use, you start getting this situation where you're distributing a lot of mandatory non-residential use that may not get filled, becomes an issue. So this is where our urban design folks had come in with a recommendation on a site this big.
Interesting. Okay, well, so then that begs the question of how you can design those long frontages to nonetheless be contributing to the street. If it's not going to be active, how can you make it still make it appealing?
Well, if it's where it's allowed, there's screening rules and et cetera, but, you know.
Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi. You know, along those lines, I know this came up during certification.
Right.
You know, I'll continue to press on sort of the location of the active uses. They're sort of sprinkled around the site, you know, at corners. And you know, I'm curious how that relates back to sort of the viability of doing that.
Well, they're not, the active uses have to be 30% of the frontages, but they're not locationally situated.
Go back to the site plan, Mike.
Oops.
There's required, so there, active uses are the red, and even if you go right before that, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
But they don't have to be there, they could be collected together.
Oh, so that's just a demonstration.
Yeah, it's 30% of the building wall facing the street, shore public walkway and upland connection has to be. So however the developer wants.
Okay, so that is.
Yes, I'm sorry. So we also think, of course, that a developer doing this along the shore public walkway would probably do more active uses than what we're showing, but we wanted to create a minimum but not create a minimum
So
that would
they can distribute them as they see fit. Okay, that's really helpful to know. And then the.
And it's also where, I'm sorry, it's also where the building wall is 50 foot greater in length. So if for some reason they had a very short building wall, they wouldn't be necessary.
Okay.
I mean, all of these building walls you see here are hundreds of feet long, so, but, you know, there can be different ways to do this.
Okay, and I'm wondering if on Wednesday we can hear from EDC about, you know, the level of public engagement that went and informed this process. You know, we just went through, what is it, Baychester Mall. There's a lot of concern that, you know, the RFP was issued and a, you know, thought to uses was done without a lot of public engagement. And how do we sort of make sure that this has incorporated some of that?
They're certainly going to detail, but they have been engaging with the community for about 2 years now, and there are 15 specific meetings with Community Board 4 and 1 to talk about these things. And you'll also look in your package, there is a commitment letter from the EDC to Community Board 4, which from the director of EDC, which addresses some of the concerns here about the steering committee situation, a committee that they'll be involved with ongoing as this moves forward. So take a look at that, and when the EDC is on Wednesday, you can certainly, we'll get more details about what those commitments mean.
That's helpful, because I know, you know, in the community board, you know, statement really mentioned the strong desire for a commitment, you know, through an advisory committee, and also with respect to additional parcels, city-owned parcels. So I wondered if there's just any backstory behind it. So, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Can you speak to, or can we make sure that EDC speaks to the pedestrian access on the bridge? If there really is commercial viability in these buildings in addition to residential, it would be useful to know the means of arriving there from the Manhattan side.
I'll let that.
Is there a pedestrian walkway on that bridge?
Yeah. Yeah.
There is.
However, there's a great difference. When you're on the street,
Right.
There's a short terminus street that doesn't cross the.
That was my question, how it meets what will be the access space. It just seems really important for longer range planning and the commercial viability of this, not just for the residents in the building, but really for business as another access point, and not using the subway, which would help with crowding.
Commissioner Cantor.
Thank you. Can you tell us how many units of housing is anticipated at build-out?
The maximum build-out, as analyzed by the EIS, is 1,045.
1045.
But that's a maximum build-out to ensure that whatever happens here will be in scope.
And that's within the 986, let's call it 1 million square foot zone?
Yes. And 2.5 acres of that is open space, 2.5, you know.
And what's the anticipated build-out?
2022, I think was the.
So we're talking about 8 years, 9 years.
2023, sorry.
And you're suggesting that a future developer or developers will not come back with requests for modification to a future commission?
It's hard for me to promise, but obviously, no, we don't expect it. We're doing this not there for that to happen, but.
Well, I share the Vice Chair's concerns. I don't know of any project that's been built in the city of New York of this scale that didn't come back to this agency at one time or another for change. And I would be very much surprised if this one indeed did not do the same thing, particularly when you have multiple developers. Could you explain to me what a special permit to facilitate new affordable housing ground floor retail space means?
Where are you? I'm sorry.
I'm reading from the intro. EDC and DCAS proposes a disposition, zoning map change, etc., and a special permit to facilitate new affordable housing, ground floor retail space, office space, community space, etc. What does that mean?
Oh, okay, it's the special permit, I see, it's awkwardly worded. The special permit is for the parking special permit, which waives parking. And to get the special permit, the development needs to facilitate affordable housing. So it should be a special permit to facilitate affordable housing, and the development is being described as retail space, office space, community space. So it's badly drafted paragraph.
Okay.
The special permit is only to facilitate, one of the findings is to facilitate affordable housing, and you can get a parking waiver if you're doing so as a finding.
I've got to admit, I agree with my colleagues who voiced some concern that we signed this thing off today and we've got nothing to do for a bunch of years, other than watch. And I don't really think a project of this size should be put under that freedom, if you will. That's all.
Commissioner Marin.
I just want to point something out for Commissioner Efron, but she's unfortunately left the room for a minute. I wanted to just clarify for the audience and for us. The 153rd Street Bridge is not the bridge you see here, crossing the Hudson. The 153rd Street Bridge is the bridge that crosses over the NTA tracks between the Grand Concourse and Park Avenue.
Yeah, this is the 149th Street Bridge.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
but Cheryl questioned the bridge.
There's a different.
Right. And repairing the bridge and access to the bridge.
Oh, she was talking about, yeah.
When the response was given, it was in referral to the 149th Street Bridge, and she was actually questioning the 153rd Street Bridge. So I just wanted to make that clear that it's a separate bridge.
Right. I misunderstood.
And I'll catch up with her.
Yeah, I misunderstood what she was.
I know that.
Other questions? Should be a lively public hearing on Wednesday.
Moving to item number 8, we're going to Brooklyn. This is the second renewal for waterfront authorizations and a special permit modifying height and setbacks for the Rose Plaza development. We're on page 216 of the briefing package, and Zayed Ahmed is here to make the presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The applicant Waterfront Realty LLC requests the second and final renewal of a special permit and a waterfront authorization for a 3-year period pursuant to zoning resolution section 11-43. The application seeks the renewal because they have not been able to proceed with the construction of their proposed development due to the market conditions. The special permit and the waterfront authorization were first granted by the City Planning Commission on March 8, 2010. 4 years later, on June 23, 2014, the City Planning Commission approved the first renewal of the special permit and authorization for a period of 3 years. This second and final renewal requested here is for a 3-year period and will expire in 2020. The applicant's site is located on the East River waterfront, south of the Williamsburg Bridge, at 470 Kent Avenue in Community District 1, Brooklyn. The Williamsburg Bridge is 4 blocks. The Williamsburg Bridge is 4 blocks south, which is right here. This is the site in red, and the Williamsburg Bridge is right here, 4 blocks south of the site. And the Brooklyn Navy Yard is 1 block south. Williamsburg Bridge is north of the site, and the Brooklyn Navy Yard is south of the site. The surrounding area to the east, which is right here, is primarily developed with medium-density residential uses zoned R6A, R7A, R7X, and R71. The previously approved special permit received 5 modification waivers for heights, setbacks, floor plate sizes, maximum wall length facing the shoreline, and the requirements of the penthouse rule. The special permit waivers allow the relocation of the bulk away from the narrow Kent Avenue, which is right here, and the East River waterfront, creating a site plan that allows larger private and public open spaces with greater light, air, and visual access to the corridor. The applicant also received an authorization for 13 modifications to the design standards of the waterfront public access area and visual corridor. The modifications to the design standards provided relief from the specific requirements related to obstruction in visual corridor and the buffer zone, location of the circulation path, location of seating in pedestrian circulation zone, pedestrian circulation zone plantings and trees, supplemental public access area dimensions, seating along circulation path, trees and shrubs spacing, and raised planting beds and berms. The Commission found that the modifications to the design standards will result in a design that is functionally equal or superior to the design prescribed by the provisions of the zoning. The renewal of the special permit and authorization will facilitate a proposed mixed-use development of approximately 800 units of housing, of which 160 units will be permanently affordable under the inclusionary housing program. The affordable units will comprise 20% of the residential floor area and will be located on-site in all 3 residential buildings. The development will also have 29,000 square feet of commercial and community facility space, a parking garage for 496 accessory parking spaces, and a 33,188 square feet public waterfront esplanade along the East River waterfront. This application was referred out to Community Board 1 on June 6, 2017. On June 13, Community Board 1 voted to approve this special permit and authorization renewal by a vote of 41 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstentions. Community Board's recommendations are reiteration of the promises made by the applicant to the Community Board and the City Council at the time of their 2010 approval. The recommendations by the Community Board are: 1, the commitment of low-income housing is deed restricted and in perpetuity. 2, the amount of low-income housing will be at 30% of the residential floor area as promised by the applicant to the City Council. The affordable units will be integrated with market rate housing and will not be dependent on funding sources. 3, the AMI of low-income units will remain in the range of 40 to 120% of AMI. And finally, the 4th recommendation is the distribution of affordable units will be 4 studios, 78 one-bedrooms, 72 bedrooms, 63 bedrooms, and 14 four-bedrooms for a total of 226 apartments at 30% of the residential floor area. Furthermore, the applicant is required to do a traffic study as a part of a DOT restrictive declaration for traffic mitigation. The applicant states that market conditions have prevented the mixed-use development to move forward, and they are seeking the second and the final 3-year renewal of the special permit and authorization. In their discussion of findings, the applicant states that there has been no unanticipated development in the area. Neither the project site nor the proposed site development, site plan, or its context have changed, and the project continues to meet all the findings required by the original grants of this special permit and authorization. A special permit and authorization granted by the City Planning Commission may be renewed provided that the Commission finds that the facts upon which the authorization and this special permit were granted have not substantially changed. Applicant's statement of findings is in the briefing package.
Questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Reade.
Am I Am I to understand that within the next 3 years, they have to obviously begin work on the site? But is
Yes.
that foundations in, how is that defined?
The foundations have to be in.
For all
For
three, or
west.
just, or would it be for one building, or would it?
I
have-
think for one building.
For one building, so there's, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Syed, the conditions that are in the community board's letter,
Yes.
are they reiterating things that were promised to them or are required of the developer? Because they don't seem reflected in the,
These
they seem to
are-
go beyond what's reflected in the briefing sheet.
Yes, they go beyond what the zoning requires and required under the inclusionary housing text. So these were the things promised to the city council when the project was approved.
And what form did that promise take? Is that,
There is a
are they tied to this renewal? Are we?
No, they're not. There was at that time a restrictive deck which the applicant filed against the property.
Does it include the conditions?
Yes.
So,
These-
so the restrictive deck still applies?
Restrictive deck is between the applicant and city council. It's not, it wasn't part of the city planning commission approval.
Okay, but it still is on the books?
It is on the books.
And does it apply to the current owner? Has this property changed hands since?
It applies to the property.
Okay.
So it is, it goes with the property, not with the owner.
Okay, so nothing we do here is going to change the commitments that were made at the city council?
Yes.
Or no?
The community, the community board took the opportunity to remind the property owner of the prior commitments.
Okay, that's exactly what I was looking for, to confirm. Yes, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Dweck.
Thank you. To clarify, the community board requested 30% affordable housing,
Yes.
but the developer is doing 20% affordable housing.
No, they, the project has, they haven't started yet, but they are committed to 30% as they promised to the city council when it was approved.
But paperwork said 160 units.
That is what the zoning requires.
But they're committed and there's a restricted deck with the city council.
Yes,
Okay.
and yes.
I got it. Thank you.
And obviously, this was pre-MIH.
Pre-MIH, right.
Yes, Commissioner Cantor.
Is this one zoning lot?
Yes,
It is.
yes, there are two tax lots, but it is one zoning
I'm
lot.
sorry, I didn't hear you.
Pardon me?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
There are two tax lots, lot 1 and lot 150, but it is one zoning lot.
It's on that basis that you made the comment that all they have to do is put in foundations for one building?
That's my understanding is yes, for the entire development, yes.
And if that were brought in by independent developers, that would not necessarily be the case. Is that true?
Pardon me?
If subsequent to today, if that site was split between 1, 2, or 3 developers, that requirement regarding foundations would not be limited to one building. Is that correct, accurate?
They can't split the zoning lot, they would have to come in, yes.
Jobs.
And there will be a new certification because waterfront cert, and it will come back to us, to the City Planning Commission, Chair cert.
So we'll come back to the commission.
Yes. If the plans change, suppose they don't make use of the special permit and there is a new developer, 1 or 2, they have to come back for a new waterfront cert, and we'll get a chance to look at it again.
Which is what we've done in the past as well.
Yes, we have done for a property just on Cadam, which is just north of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the commission? Then I would ask for a vote by a show of hands. Okay, the special permit is extended.
Thank you.
Going to item number 9, the Domino Flexible Field is an authorization to modify the waterfront public access area requirements of the Domino Waterfront Public Access Plan. Corinza Wood of the Brooklyn office will tell us about this for pre-hearing review.
Great. Good afternoon, Commissioners.
I'm sorry, it's not pre-hearing
Not
review.
pre-hearing.
It's, no, this is not a pre-hearing. I got carried away.
This is a private application on behalf of Domino LLC requesting a zoning authorization pursuant to Section 62822B to 1, permit a reduction or replacement of planted lawn area, and then 2, permit an increase in linear feet of retaining wall constituting the perimeter edges of planting areas, and a reduction in the linear feet at the perimeter of planting areas within 6 inches of adjacent grade level. There's also a concurrent chairperson zoning certification pursuant to Section 62811, showing compliance with the Brooklyn 1 waterfront access plan. This action would facilitate the replacement of 6,771 square feet of planted lawn area with artificial turf within the Domino flexible field, and this is to allow for increased year-round use, as well as the replacement of 511 square feet of planted lawn area with a rubber play-safe surface adjacent to the play area to comply with the Consumer Product Safety Commission requirements for newly constructed playgrounds. So the Domino project site is located in the south side section of Williamsburg in Community District 1, Brooklyn. The surrounding uses in the area generally consist of mix of light industrial, office, residential, and ground floor retail. The areas immediately adjacent to the site are zoned with an M3-1 district and MX districts. So the applicant is proposing to replace a portion of the planted lawn area with artificial turf and play-safe material, reducing the total amount of planted area by 7,282 square feet. According to the applicant, the artificial turf would provide an improved condition for the flexible field, where heavy use associated with organized team sports and other activities would likely cause significant wear and tear to planted lawn. The use of artificial turf would allow for more regular use of the field without the need for significant interruptions during portions of the year to allow for regrowth of grass lawn. The replacement of lawn in the play area with play-safe material would ensure that the area complies with Consumer Product Safety Commission requirements, which does not allow for grass lawn in newly constructed public playgrounds. Finally, the applicant has also determined that the site conditions necessitate additional soil volume in raised planting beds within the Domino upland connections. This requires a higher edge around the planting areas. Thus, the applicant is proposing a 1% increase in the maximum linear feet of retaining wall, and thus a reduction of 1% in the planting area perimeter within 6 inches of grade. The application was referred out to Community Board 1, who voted 41 in favor, 0 abstaining, and 0 in opposition, citing safety and maintenance issues as reasons for their positive recommendation. Thank you.
Questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner
Just
Penter.
an observation, if I might. The applicant is coming back to us to move around a few thousand square feet of landscaping, but they're coming back to the commission. The earlier presentation is giving a sketch to the commission and asking it to approve it, and that should be the end of it. I find that rather difficult to accept.
Pointed observation, thank you. Any other questions, comments? If not, we'll schedule this for a vote.
We're going to move from item number 9 to item number 11, the East Shore Special Coastal Risk Management Plan in Staten Island. This is for pre-hearing review, and Alina Farishta is here to present this application to facilitate an implementation of a resilient plan for Oakwood Beach, Grand Beach, and Ocean Breeze in Staten Island.
Hello, good afternoon, Commissioners. City Planning's proposal for the East Shore buyout areas, Special Coastal Risk District, and rezoning includes a zoning map amendment and a zoning text amendment in Community Boards 2 and 3 of Staten Island. This application was certified by the Commission on April 24th. This proposal focuses on the New York State buyout areas in Staten Island. The state buyout areas outlined in white on this map are located in 2 different areas of the East Shore. On the north, just south of Ocean Breeze Park, are Grand Beach and Ocean Breeze. On the south is Oakwood Beach. The goal of the state's buyout program is to acquire private property, demolish existing structures, and convert the land to open space to serve as buffers to future storms. Recommendations for the state buyout areas come out of the Resilient Neighborhood Study of the East Shore, which was released in April of this year. These recommendations have been developed through an extensive outreach process and consultation with the East Shore Community Advisory Committee, which is made up of representatives of local civic groups and community boards. The 3 state buyout areas are low-lying, located directly adjacent to the lower New York Bay, and experience heavy damage as a result of Hurricane Sandy. Large areas of freshwater wetlands mapped and regulated by DEC and DEP's Planned Blue Belt are largely coterminous with these buyout areas. Overall, the issues faced within the buyout areas include natural hazards, including flooding and wildfires, which are a risk to public safety. Even after the construction of the Army Corps' line of protection, the buyout areas would remain in the 1% annual chance floodplain due to the proximity to wetlands and stormwater flooding. The function of planned DEP Blue Belts and existing freshwater wetlands may be impaired by continued development in these areas. And finally, the state buyout program is voluntary and would not reach 100% participation. So residents would remain within these areas and property owners would retain development rights as of right under current zoning. This proposal seeks a zoning text amendment to create the East Shore Subdistrict of the Special Coastal Risk District in order to align local zoning regulations with the New York State's long-term vision for the buyout areas to remain as open space and to reduce risk to public safety by limiting future residential development in these highly vulnerable areas to flooding and other natural hazards, while ensuring preservation of ecologically sensitive areas. In addition, the proposal seeks a zoning map change in the commercial area of Grand Beach to align commercial zoning with existing uses and building character, while providing relief from high parking requirements that may inhibit rebuilding after future floods. To accomplish these goals, the East Shore Subdistrict would limit all new development to single-family detached residences to limit future residential density in the buyout areas. To ensure sufficient review of new development, the subdistrict would create a CPC authorization for all new development and horizontal enlargements. Sandy-damaged buildings would be allowed to continue to be rebuilt as of right, and elevations and other minor repairs to existing buildings may be made as of right. In addition, community facilities with sleeping or overnight accommodations would be prohibited, and lower density growth management area limitations on certain community facility uses would be applied consistently in the zoning district such that the strictest limitations apply. The proposed boundaries of the Special Coastal Risk District would align with the boundaries of the New York State buyout areas. For proposals for one single family residence, the CPC would find that the development's potential impacts on natural drainage, open spaces, and wetland areas are minimized, that the development would be located on an improved street serving other existing residences, and the proposed development minimizes risks to public safety from natural hazards, including flooding and wildfires. For proposals for 2 or more dwellings on a zoning lot, the maximum number of residences on the zoning lot would be calculated on a minimum of 9,500 square feet of lot area per residence, excluding the delineated wetland area by DEC. The Commission could allow modifications to the bulk, except FAR, to allow residences to be sited in a manner that would achieve a superior site plan that preserves wetlands, minimizes the need for new infrastructure, and is consistent with the character of the surrounding area. In addition, the proposal includes a zoning map change to the existing C1-1 overlay in Grand Beach. The existing uses along Father Capadonna Boulevard, as pictured here, are primarily local retail and services. The Community Advisory Committee, the city, and local elected representatives agreed that maintaining the existing retail in this location is appropriate given that Father Capadonna Boulevard at this location is at a higher elevation than their properties located east of the street, and the existing street infrastructure is supported by city services. The existing commercial buildings were not eligible for acquisition through the New York State buyout program. The existing C1-1 is proposed to be reduced in depth from Quincy Avenue to the lots fronting Father Capadonna Boulevard between Grand Boulevard and Slater Boulevard, and the overlay would be reestablished as a C1-3 commercial overlay. This proposed overlay would not be included within the East Shore subdistrict. This change would permit the same range of uses but reduce the required off-street parking to more closely match the type of local retail and parking provision that exists now. The reduction in parking would make reconstruction after future floods less difficult if these buildings are substantially damaged. This application was referred out to Community Boards 2 and 3. Community Board 2 held a public hearing and by a vote of 17 to 11 with 1 abstention, adopted a resolution recommending approval of this application. During meetings with the Community Board 2, Community Board members had questions about the proposal centered on the rezoning from C1-1 to C1-3 in Grand Beach, particularly the reduction in the extent of commercial overlay and the reduction of required parking. While there was support for restricting commercial uses on lots fronting narrow side streets and the low-lying areas vulnerable to flooding, some members of Community Board 2 questioned the accuracy of DCP's data regarding the level of participation in the buyout program in Grand Beach. Despite their property ownership demonstrated in our presentation, there was a Community Board member who stated that the state had acquired all or nearly all the private property in the areas currently zoned within the C1-1 overlay, and that there was no benefit to reducing the depth of this overlay. DCP's data provided by the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery and current as of April 17, 2017 shows that there are 31 privately owned vacant lots remaining in the area of Grand Beach currently zoned under C1-1. According to the Lower Density Growth Management Area rules, these remaining private lots would be required to have non-residential uses on the ground floor, which the community and the city's recommendations have noted is not the preferred future vision for the area. The Community Board was in support of the proposed Special Coastal Risk District. In addition, Community Board 3 held a public hearing and by a vote of 27-0 adopted a resolution recommending approval of this application. And the Staten Island Borough Board and Borough President also issued a recommendation to approve the application. These should be included within your briefing package. Thank you. Please let me know if you have questions.
Yes, Commissioner Besser.
Thank you, Melina. I just had a question about the 11 that were opposed in Community Board 2, but I believe she just answered it, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, this will go to a public hearing on Wednesday.
Items number 12 and 13 are council modifications. Item number 12 is a proposed council modification for 125 Edgewater Street. Christopher Hayden of the Staten Island office will explain what the council is proposing.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. 125 Edgewater is a private application located in Staten Island's Community District 1 that was certified by the Commission on December 12, 2016, and included 4 actions. The first, a zoning map amendment from M21 to R6, R6C22, and M21 within the Stapleton Special District. A zoning text amendment to the Stapleton Special District to create 2 new sub-areas, to modify the special district regulations as they apply to the subject site, and to modify Appendix F to designate the site as a mandatory inclusionary housing area, a zoning authorization for phased development of a waterfront public access area, and a zoning certification for waterfront public access and visual corridors. The actions would facilitate the construction of 3 new mixed-use buildings with 371 residential units, including affordable housing, commercial space, 346 parking spaces, and a new waterfront public access area. On March 22, 2017, the Commission held a public hearing, and on May 10, 2017, the Commission approved the application. On June 28, 2017, City Council filed modifications to the application which would revise the mandatory inclusionary housing options by removing the workforce option and adding the deep affordability option. So the workforce option would require 30% of the of the residential units to be affordable to households with an average median income of 115% of the area median income, and the deep affordability option would require 20% of the residential units to be affordable to households with an average median income of 40% of the area median income. So in addition to this change, options 1 and 2 would remain in place and be available to the development. Staff have reviewed the modifications and have determined that they are within scope and require no further environmental review. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commission? If not, I'll ask for your assent by a show of hands. Okay, I'll be sending the letter over to the council.
Thank you. Item number 13 is regarding 1350 Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn. Kevin Kraft will explain the council modification.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. On June 21st, the City Council requested a modification to the zoning text amendment for 1350 Bedford Avenue, located in Community District 8 in Brooklyn. The City Council requested applying MIH Option 1 and removing the proposed MIH Option 2. Thank you.
Pretty straightforward. Any questions? Okay, then I will ask for assent by a show of hands. And I'll send another letter over to the council. Thank you.
Future votes. For July 12th, staff has prepared favorable reports on the following applications. The Manhattan West Phase 3 text amendment, which are text amendments to modify public access area signage and other provisions of the Special Hudson Yards District. 462 Broadway, a special permit to allow retail use on the ground floor and cellar of a large retail establishment more than 10,000 square feet on the first, second, and third floors of an existing 6-story building. Ebenezer Plaza, zoning map and zoning text amendments to facilitate construction of 2 mixed-use buildings containing a total of 531 affordable housing units. 101 Circle Road is renewal of an authorization for topo mods and construction of a steep slope and construction within a steep slope to develop 6 houses in Staten Island. There's a briefing package on page 464 of your agenda. On July...
Sorry, Commissioner Besser?
I'm sorry, I just was looking for a response from the applicant regarding the conditions from the community board, so I could get a copy of that.
Plan?
You know, before vote.
Well, the vote is on Wednesday, so
Yeah.
when you'll follow up with Commissioner Besser?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. On July 26th, staff will be preparing reports on the following applications. 40 Worcester Street, which is a special permit to allow retail use on the ground floor and residential use on the upper floors of an existing 6-story historic building. East 126 Bus Depot, a mixed-use development with 730 dwelling units, community facility space, and an African burial ground memorial, including a historical and cultural center. 120 Kingston Avenue, a special permit to reestablish the Kingston Lounge on the ground floor and cellar of a 3-story historic building in a residential district. 1618 Fulton Street, an 11-story mixed-use building with 96 units of affordable housing in Brooklyn. 50 Nevin Street rezoning, a zoning map and zoning text amendments to facilitate approximately 128 affordable and supportive housing units and ground floor retail use. And the Maple Street Open Space Garden, which is a site selection acquisition of property for passive recreational and garden use.
You'll notice that we put that vote last so we can all leave with a smile on our faces. And any other business?
I believe we are done.
Before 4 p.m. Thank you all.
See you Wednesday.